Our story begins with some warriors facing a hill. On the other side a heavily armed army awaits. Among them one stands out, a gentleman in shining armor, and with a menacing aspect he stands by a crucified man and sarcastically says he must be having a good view from up there. Then he tells the man that he will witness with his own eyes all his soldiers dying on the battlefield, and with his ears he hears their screams as they are wounded and killed. He also tells the man to feel with his own body the great achievement of him who became a legend. Next the gentleman orders his red army to advance and to knock down anyone standing in their way. In addition he orders his men to make it clear who the superior species is. The red army easily slaughters its enemies, leaving none of them alive. After some time only their bodies remain on the ground, and they are already attracting the attention of vultures. Next to the crucified man the Red Knight says that on second thought he hasn't laughed much these last few days, mainly because all the strong people are dead and this fight is not as fun as it used to be, and it's not very exciting either. The man on the cross tells the gentleman that they are all demons. However, the Red Knight asks if he thinks he is any different, claiming that this world is a hell and everyone in it is a demon. After some time in the vicinity of Camp Castle Leto, a rowdy boy is running because he is being pursued. His pursuers try to persuade him to stop, saying that if Leto stops and gets caught he will simply get beaten up, whereas otherwise someone else will die. They say that Leto is too fast to catch him and they try in any way to convince him to stop running. Leto says that if they didn't yell all day they might be successful in the capture, but distracted by this conversation he doesn't notice a hole in front of him and ends up falling into the depths. Then one of the pursuers says Leto should watch his step, because there are several holes like that in the region and he should know it. The other one says they should climb down there and look for him, because if they come back empty-handed they will be punished. But before going down his partner warns him about something and shows a nest trace in the hole, saying that even if he didn't die from the fall Leto is sure to perish soon. Back to the boy, he gets up after falling when he encounters a cave. He thinks he needs to find an exit quickly, but as he walks through the dark place he encounters spider webs that stick to his face, and he doesn't even notice the greater danger ahead. Outside the cave snow is falling from the sky and covering the ground. As they return those who pursued Leto wonder what they should do, because the last time something like this happened a body was required as proof, but they don't want to go down there for anything. But as they walk they notice a presence following them. When they try to check what it is, one of them dies instantly, and the other one is extremely shocked by it. The Red Knight says one mouth is enough to answer his questions. Next he asks why the castle's servants are there. The servant answers that one of the slaves escaped from the castle and they chased him there, but he ended up falling in the spider's territory. Hearing this the knight says the slave must already be dead and they just need to put another slave to do his duties. But the servant says it's not just that, because the slave escaped after stabbing Prince Roar in the with a fork, and the prince ordered them to capture him alive. But then the red-armored gentleman starts laughing. The nervous servant doesn't really understand. Then the gentleman says it's funny that the prince is injured by a mere slave, and he doesn't believe that a guy like him will become a king anyway. He asks if all the other gentlemen have arrived at Cam's castle, as that was the king's command, but the servant says he hasn't heard anything about it, and asks why the king would visit such a small castle since the gentleman doesn't answer anything. The servant says he's leaving. He then runs towards the castle, but before he realizes it he gets his head chopped off because the gentleman says he doesn't need extra mouths. Next he wants to take care of this matter before leaving, because he thinks if someone gets bitten by a female spider it might become problematic later. After that he jumps into the hole and immediately encounters some smaller spiders. However, he has no difficulty fighting them. The gentleman uses a fighting style he nicknames the Dance of Knives, and with that he easily slices through the spiders. His confidence is so great that he scoffs at the spiders, especially since these are just baby spiders. He comes across them and thinks that this is the first time he finds a male and a female in the same nest, but since the female hasn't shown up yet he hopes to encounter her soon. After defeating a few spiders his armor calls him master and asks if it can devour them. The gentleman knows that these spiders are his armor's favorite and says he'll wait for it to finish. Next the evil spirit that inhabits the armor gives thanks and advances on the arachnid corpses, devouring them completely, leaving nothing behind. Looking at an edge the gentleman deduces that he should go through there. Crossing through the passage he comes across webs and skeletons, but soon he paves the way by cutting through everything that stands in his way. He even knocks down some bodies that were encased when he cuts The web of one of them. He realizes that the body inside no longer lives, however the faces of the corpses show a strange smile. Upon seeing this, the gentleman concludes that they must have been poisoned by the spider as well as having all the blood drained from their bodies, but that is not the real problem because one of the cocoons is empty and has been torn from the inside. The fact that he could live without having his blood sucked means he was bitten by a female spider, so the gentleman closes his eyes and focuses and tells him to come out because he knows that the boy is hiding behind a rock. The knight says that he must be the only one who managed to escape the castle and asserts that he will not kill him if he comes out. Leto however thinks he was discovered and will be killed anyway in the end, but the knight says he will count down for him to appear. This number only makes the boy remember that there are three races in the world: the yellow humans, the green people, and the blue elves, the predators that dominated the world. Soon after Leto leaves his hiding place, the knight says that the boy thinks quickly in such situations and asks his age. He answers that he is 15 and soon wonders how he will get out of there, but quickly he is hurt because the gentleman cuts his eyes and asks if he was thinking of escaping. The gentleman claims that normally he would execute him coldly, but for some reason he was interested in him. While Leto is nervous about not being able to see anymore, he hears the gentleman question about his story of sticking a fork in Prince Romer's eyes, saying that if Leto makes him laugh he will spare him. Upon hearing this from the gentleman, Leto wonders what he is talking about so he can focus on the pain he is feeling. The elven gentleman however says that instead he could simply kill him, but the boy doesn't want that and reveals that his name is Leto. He tells that half a year ago some elves killed his parents while he and his brother became slaves. Leo was in charge of cleaning dog poop and he always complained about the smell. While doing that he thought he had to find his brother. Leto knew he was alive because he heard the last time his brother was sold to another territory. While cleaning the dog feces he thinks the dogs must have eaten a lot and he can barely survive on a bowl of barley porridge, making him think that even a dog has a better life than his. But in a moment of distraction Leto almost died by one of them, a rather different dog. Almost pulled him to the cage. His name is Cerberus and Leto heard that the dog could have 3 heads, but he did not expect this. He stares at the dog for a while and says that it too must be feeling trapped and eager to escape even though it already had a name. The boy says that from now on he's going to call the dog Sandal. He also says that if it behaves he'll set it free as he plans to escape there himself. On the other hand, one of the boy's superiors asks why he has stopped working and why he has yet to use what he has collected to fertilize the garden. Leto responds that he has already collected a wheelbarrow full and it still hasn't ended. To exacerbate the situation he claims that he hardly moves because he only eats a bowl of barley porridge every day and asks if the boss doesn't have other food, something like meat. Promptly the boss punishes the boy for his audacity, telling him to put himself in his place as a slave, and that he will die if he continues this behavior back in the present. The elf asks if the boy wants to die. He also says that he should skip all this boring part and go straight to what matters, the part about the fork in the prince's eye. He asserts that the prince lives escorted by guards and asks how the boy got so close so as to be able to attack him. Leto reveals that on the night of the attack the castle was being visited by an aristocrat named Lady Ba who came to the castle to see the prince. The boy was in the same room as the lady, the prince, and his guard. As the prince boasted about her visit, Leto observed him and thought that he was the one responsible for killing his mother. The prince's guard noticed that the boy was too close and ordered him to step back. Leto however could only think that he was in front of his enemy. He had planned to escape the next day but thought the odds were in his favor because this place held a secret that only he knew. Inside the dog's cage lock he planted 3 seeds 6 months ago so that as they grew they degraded it. Soon the lock would weaken, allowing it to be opened easily. With that in mind, Leo took one of the meats used for the dog's food and caught its attention, saying it was time to eat, so he threw the meat far away, which ended up hitting the guard's head. Upon seeing this, the dog was riled up inside the cage and unwittingly the guard was attacked by it, being bitten right in the head. At this moment the prince was unprotected, and it was the moment the boy took to attack the prince in no way expected this but was stabbed with a fork just like puncturing a piece of fruit. The Red Knight interrupts the story asking how a slave got hold of a fork and tells the boy that there's no use lying. Leto responds that he found the fork mixed with one of the dog's excrements. This information sounded quite funny to the elf since now he knows that Prince Roar was hit by a fork found in the midst of ___. Leto continues saying that seizing the opportunity when Curious went into a fury, he ran directly under the dog's cage. After that, through the holes he dug, he passed through the drainage channel, reaching the other side to where the waste and feces were dropped and swept by him out of the castle. After he got out, Leo fell into the water, which due to the cold weather was freezing, but his determination to escape was so great that the boy looked at the castle from afar, and while under super cold water, he shouts that he will return stronger and also will remove the prince's other eye. After this, Leto discloses that he ran from the pursuers who found him and ended up falling into this cave. After hearing the story, the Red Knight stares at him and the boy stands still, not knowing what else to say. The gentleman stands up and says that the boy's story was interesting and even funny, but he can't let him escape. Leto asks why, and the elf tells the boy that he was bitten by a female green-eyed spider. The elf says that the boy's body is getting hotter and his eyes must have already recovered because this is the only healing power he got from the spider, and the elf only cut his eyes to confirm this. But as the boy is still pretending that he can't see, the gentleman judges him as intelligent. Leto then realizes that he's been found out. Meanwhile, the elf says that these spiders only reproduce in one way: they inject their eggs into other creatures and give them special abilities to keep the eggs alive, but in this process the infected creature loses its sanity and becomes a monster, devouring everything it sees before it. As soon as the puppies start to be born, they devour the person from the inside out, starting with the stomach. Upon hearing this, Leto is scared because he had no idea that there were spider babies inside him. As the had previously mentioned, the boy's story is interesting, but he considers killing him as an act of mercy, and he says it would be fast and painless. Leto, however, tells him to shut up and argues that he can't die before finding his brother, and he says that instead of dying he is the one who will kill the Red Knight. Leto feels a little strange, as if something inside him was boiling. He doesn't understand this feeling and he wonders if it is some kind of power, for now he feels something that he did not feel before. With that, he jumps towards the elf, thinking that it might be worth trying to attack him. The elven gentleman watches him, however, and he notices that the boy is trying to use the same fork that hurt the prince. Soon he manages to dodge and counterattack Leto, but what he definitely did not expect is that the boy could dodge as well. This left him quite impressed, but before Leto could do anything, the gentleman hits him with a kick which throws him far away. Seeing the boy's current behavior, the elf wonders if the mutation is already happening. From a distance he sees the child getting up through some smoke. His silhouette emerges, but something different is happening, different enough to surprise the elf, because not only did Leto mutate, but he also had the fork merged into his body, something he himself did not understand. In a way, the elf finds it quite funny. Leto, however, does not see the humor. On the contrary, he is scared because his arm has turned into a fork. But for a brief moment he thinks that now is not the time to worry about this, concluding that he needs to resolve this impasse first. The Red Knight seems to have liked his determination unexpectedly too. The elf moves quickly and whispers in his ear that he found him to be a lovely boy. Then he strikes an attack which leaves Leto badly wounded. However, this was not enough to kill him. Far away in the castle of Cam, a nurse tells the prince that because the wound is deep it will take about 2 months to fully recover. After being sewed up, Homer asks for a mirror. One of his servants brings the object and holds it while the prince looks at himself upon seeing his injured and SWNI. The prince despairs. However, the one who stitched it tries to lighten the mood, saying that he has a cool look, but the prince shows his dissatisfaction by throwing him from the top of the castle tower, killing him by the fall. Homer then gives a great roar and asks if the slave who injured him has been found. The servants say no, but a search team is still looking for him. Homer is irritated and tells them to send all the available soldiers now to find the slave. However, he changes his mind immediately and says that he himself will go after his enemy, but one of his advisors says for him to calm down because he is at a crucial moment now, because his bride-to-be has everything ready and he can fulfill his vengeance promise. After becoming king, back to the battle between Leto and the elf. The boy tries to stand up and he thinks he is no match for his enemy because none of his attacks have come close to hitting him, but he doesn't want to die there because he is motivated to find his brother. Looking at the boy, the gentleman just laughs and asks if the boy wants to have a new chance, and he offers him again the opportunity to fight for him. Leto didn't expect this, but the elf says that there are many warriors fighting for him because he personally created a special form with powerful warriors handpicked, and he hopes the boy becomes one of these warriors, stating that he can even remove the spider eggs that are in his body. Leto says that until now the gentleman was trying to kill him and wonders if This is some kind of trick. The elf reveals that it occasionally happens that some that have been stung by the spider keep their sanity intact, stating that this kind of guy is useful, and most important than that is the fact that the elf says that he likes the boy. He also says that the job he offers is simple. Leto just needs to obey his commands and be in charge of killing humans, but when he hears this, Leto is shocked, because he didn't expect that to be his function, even showing a face of dissatisfaction. He agrees to be subordinate to the Red Knight because he thinks that anyway he wouldn't have many options, and for now just wants to stay alive and eventually have a chance to escape. The elf is happy to hear the boy's words and says that he made an excellent choice, but then he launches an attack. Leto is left puzzled about what happened. Nevertheless, upon looking back, he realizes there was something, so he understands that the elf didn't try to attack him. Instead, it was a creature which was hidden. Looking at the monster, the elf identifies it as a stiletto from the assassination unit, and judging by the situation has a guess saying that the creature is there on the prince's orders, and it seems like he is plotting something with Lady Ba. However, he asks if the monster thinks it will be able to kill him alone. Next he scoffs at him, saying that he forgot. He won't hear an answer as the monster's vocal cords have been torn out, but the elf is wrong about one thing, because the monster is not alone. Numerous creatures start to emerge from the darkness of the cave and move towards him. Seeing this doesn't please him at all. Meanwhile, Leto ponders what is happening and is completely clueless, but upon watching the creatures approaching in large numbers, he believes this is his chance to slip away unnoticed. For him, this is the perfect opportunity. He thinks that when the fight with these monsters begins, he should intentionally lag behind and through the gap seize the opportunity to run. After that, one of the monsters charges and tries to attack the elf directly, but he quickly has his head ripped off by him. Leto realizes that the elf is the only one being targeted since he is not being attacked. He attempts to seize the gap to run. The monster who coordinates the smaller creature sees Leto escaping and thinks that he shouldn't worry about him, as the spider should handle it soon, because his main target is Cain Ballstein. He believes hiding in the dark and catching him off guard is his best option, so he orders his ghouls to keep on harassing him. However, Cain isn't an easy opponent to defeat. In a way, he easily defeats the ghouls, tearing off their heads with just one swing. Cain Ballstein even scoffs at his opponents because he slices through them with such ease, but seeing him attacking the monster assassin thinks he just needs a bit more pressure. C continues attacking the ghouls. He dodges their strikes, slicing them upright. After, however, from the shadows the assassin emerges, thinking that his target will never notice him due to his secret technique, because he doesn't have eyes in the back of his head. At least that's what the monster thought, as his target just sensed his assault through his armor. On the other end of the cave, Leto runs conversation, and one of them says he recently had a daughter and she is now 2 months old, and when he saw the baby who had just come into this world, he thought it wouldn't be a waste even if he gave up his life. Leto listens carefully to this dialogue. The guard continues, saying that it's one more mouth to feed, and if he knew this was going to happen, maybe it would be better to be called to the battlefield because he could earn some money by killing humans. The boy quickly becomes enraged at such words and is reminded of what happened to his parents. Exactly what the guard described happened to them. They were killed in battlefields. He then thinks that it doesn't matter if the enemies are blue or green, they all killed humans and murdered his family and others. This served perfectly as the motivation that the protagonist needed. One of the guards hears a noise coming from the boy, but before he could do anything, his partner had already died, and he was about to be attacked, so he tries to defend himself with his crossbow, but Leto manages to stop him from firing. The guard, however, counterattacks, landing a kick on the boy, but now he is away from his weapon. He tries running to the crossbow, but before he can grab the weapon, Leto moves quickly and attacks him, preventing him from having time to react. The guard pleads for his life, saying that he has a family and a newborn daughter, but his words are not enough to convince the boy. Elsewhere, far from there, one of the royal guards is tracking the protagonist. He follows some clues along the way and runs towards his target. After arriving in a village, he encounters some villagers of the Green People and asks one of them if by any chance a human boy appeared around, but the villager says he only saw a rat and nothing else behind him. The prince marches with his army and asks his hunter if he found anything, but he says no. However, there is nothing to worry about because others are also looking for the runaway. Furthermore, children are not Familiar with the area, only a matter of time until they find him. He also states that the prince doesn't need to personally go searching. Rare says that in the past they used to ride an animal called a horse, a species that has become rare, and the prince still wants to have one as he is not at ease when he doesn't get what he wants, and his father always told him that he had to get what he wanted on his own. Therefore he wishes to capture the fugitive, and with his own hands tear out the slave's eyes, even declaring that after that he'll cut his body into pieces and give it to the dogs to eat. While he says this, one of the villagers, while holding a child in her arms, begs for his majesty's help, stating that as time goes by the crops diminish but the taxes double and they don't have enough food to get through the winter. She thus begs the prince to give them some food, just enough for the children to eat. Next the prince asks if she is asking for his help, then he says that the only thing he can do is cut off her hands and give them to the child to eat, or perhaps he could feed all the villagers with just one arm and not just that child, but they could easily gain weight anyway even with just a little food. So the prince tells her to stand still because he is going to cut enough to feed everyone. Frightened, the woman shrinks back, but the prince's blow is interrupted by a noise around. His bodyguard hears the sound of the arrow with the whistle, and says that it seems to have come from the guard post and they might have found something. So the prince commands everyone to move their back to the protagonist. He laments what he has done because it is the first time he's killed someone and is shocked by it. For a moment he reflects on his actions, however he concludes that it's not a big deal, so he gets up from the ground saying it's the guard's fault for being born as one of the green people. But he hears a sound coming from outside, and when he looks toward the sound he notices a commotion. Other guards approach, and upon seeing the boy they ask who he is. Leto wonders who they are and if they can shoot the arrow. However, when hiding he hears a different sound coming from the same direction, and when he looks at them he realizes that the Red Knight has already killed them. Leto approaches and asks what those guys were doing, but the elf simply says they were unlucky and they need to run because the soldiers will show up after hearing the whistle, and they need to act quickly. The protagonist thinks it was all in vain, and the elf says it's not just that, as he bids him welcome to hell, calling him a little demon. However, Leo doesn't like that nickname at all. Regardless, they need to hurry, so the group runs away from the guard's fort, but while running they are seen by a village woman who wonders where they are going in such a hurry. Still they keep running and head for some hills. Noticing the elf is way ahead, the protagonist asks how long they have to run. Kane responds that after crossing the canyon and entering the forest they will find a good place to shelter. Leto asks if they can take a small break because his stomach hurts and thinks the spiders will come out. The elf quickly perceives something and holds the boy, dragging him to a ravine. After descending and leaving the route, C says they are being pursued and the pursuers are close. Leto asks if the soldiers have already arrived, but the elf responds that in truth they are assassins and they will soon launch an attack. Thus they hide by the edge of a river. Leto tries to observe the location more attentively. He looks down and sees a river. Ever looking up at the sky he realizes that there are some mountains around, but he says he doesn't see anyone around. However, the elf says it's not about seeing but intuition, like a sixth sense. Leo however thinks it's nonsense. C says that as you face enemies on a battlefield you develop a higher perception of things such as madness and also the feeling of fear, the burning rage of some fighters which they use to kill their enemies and allows them to carry out cold-blooded executions. After the collision of so many feelings, what comes next is calm. Leto says the elf is spouting nonsense again. However, the elf says he'll find that after spending time in a place like this he'll be able to feel what he can't see, a killing intent directed at you from afar. Kane notices someone approaching and says it's quite bold of an assassin to face him hidden like a shadow. The assassin nears. Holding a side in hand, the mysterious creature moves under the water, and through this the water moves around him, using the river's water to its advantage as if it were a smoke screen, but instead of smoke it uses the water to camouflage itself and disappears from the elf's sight right after the protagonist is amazed at the disappearance of the assassin. However, Kay assures he will return. He was right, for the assassin quickly reappears behind them in an attempt to catch them off guard. The assassin wastes no time and attacks, but the elf isn't easily caught unprepared, unlike the protagonist who is face to face with a blade. However, Kane strikes the assassin, pushing her away from the boy. The two start to fight on the edge of a cliff, but this doesn't seem to be a problem for C. He charges with his blade AES towards his opponent, who in turn is able to jump high and use this as an advantage to attack C from above. However, the elf is an experienced fighter and doesn't provide openings for his enemy to attack him. After his attack is interrupted, the assassin retreats, distancing himself. Cain says his opponent is indeed skilled even when fighting with just one arm. However, the side-wielding assassin points out something about the elf and makes him realize that his armor was hit and he hadn't noticed. The inhabitant of the red armor seems to have felt blow but quickly recovers. Cain thinks his armor is still recovering due to the detoxification and Quinn's power is weakening anyway. It has been a while since he met a guy who emitted so much energy. On the other hand, the protagonist knows that the more he thinks about it, his best chance of survival is to stick by the elf, in this case earning a few points by staying by his side wouldn't be wrong. Immediately Leto thinks he wants to show off his skills and prove that he can easily defeat any enemy just like he did with the green guards. Then he shouts to his master saying that he will help him, but the elf tells the boy to be quiet and he will kill him if he intervenes in his battle against the assassin. Then the protagonist remains quiet in his corner next to Sandal, obeying what his master commanded. Leto thinks that the elf will probably win, but still, if he could be hit a few times it would be quite satisfactory, so he begins rooting against Cain. However, the red-armored knight does not give his opponent any rest. He fiercely attacks the masked man, who decided to use a different strategy. Using the water to his advantage, he disappears into the current and the elf loses sight of his enemy, but for a brief moment he notices something approaching and he nearly gets hit but barely manages to counterattack. The assassin stops on the other side and Cain gives a sarcastic smile for having wounded him, but he gradually realizes that it's not quite the case, because where he managed to hit the enemy slowly begins to heal, similar to his red armor, only the assassin's armor is different, something that Cain himself recognizes as a living armor. And he wonders how an assassin obtains something like that. Either way, this isn't the most important thing now, and Cain states that he will finish off his opponent and take his living armor, which will serve as food for Chiron. Above all, he wants the fight to be more entertaining. Back to the protagonists, his faithful friend is troubled by something. Leto asks Sle what's wrong, but he soon sees that danger approaches, for the soldiers have finally reached them, so he shouts to his master, who incidentally did not appreciate being interrupted at all, so the elf requests a recess in the battle and advances towards the boy. Just as Leo was about to report what he saw, Kay grips him by the throat in anger, for he had previously warned him not to interrupt, and asks if he wants to die. However, the boy says he just wanted to warn him about the arrival of the soldiers, and in his mind he says it is he who will kill the elf. The master says so they've already made it here, and the boy asks what they will do, but before Cain can answer, the assassin calls him, saying they should delay their departure until later, claiming that it all loses its meaning if he can't kill Cain with his own strength. However, Cain says he talks too much and moreover is an assassin with a gentleman's discourse. The assassin says that Cain committed the same sin as he, and the only way they can be forgiven by the almighty albino god is through death. Then after that he uses the water once more to camouflage himself, and before leaving he tells C to stay alive because he will return soon. Leto is left impressed at the assassin disappearing again, unlike the elf, who feels frustrated. Not far from there, one of the prince's men says they found them, and the prince wants to take a look for himself, but he says he can't see anything. He hasn't realized that he's trying to see with his patched eye, and his soldier tries to warn him, but at the same time is startled by the prince's reaction. This time, using the other eye, he confirms that the boy is the slave who wounded his eye, and next to him in red armor is C. Roar didn't expect the knight to still be alive and wonders what the hell the assassins are doing and where they are, calling them damned foolish believers. His bodyguard believes they should wait for more soldiers before facing Cain. The prince thinks he can't just run away, for it would be the butt of jokes. He knows he has more numbers on his side, even 2 knights. If he can kill Kay here, no one would despise him. Then the prince gives the order for his men to advance. Contrary to the advice of his guard, the soldiers get ready to shoot from a distance, and with a giant crossbow they fire a rope with a hook. Once it latches on the other side, they prepare to zip line down. With pulley equipped on the rope, they descend towards the targets, including the prince's guard, who goes first. C observes this and says if they are reaching them so quickly, it means that other soldiers must be nearby, so he runs with the protagonist, saying that the forest is close. While running, Leto thinks he can't even have a brief moment of rest in peace. The story changes direction, introducing us to the west of the continent amid a purple sky. This is where a cursed land lies, home to all kinds of monsters, the arena of tribal war, a battlefield. Somewhere in there a mysterious warrior lurks. His companion approached him asking if he was dead, but the warrior responded that he was merely meditating. He says it was indeed a tough victory this time, and he Even broke a rib. His companion replies that on the contrary the guy's bones should have turned to gunpowder. He also mentions that this was the third transformed and they couldn't even find the spider's nest, so they have no idea where he came from. The warrior asked what his companion ate. He responds that he found dried meat after searching the corpse, hence the warrior also asks for some, and after a rat comes out he says he was startled. But his companion tells him not to say that because it might hurt his pet. Then he also says he has a bad feeling about this and worries about Kame. The warrior says his companion's hunches are almost always right and asks if they should really go see. He replies saying that he has in fact already Shara a few days ago and still has a lot of work to do there. Back at the protagonist's core, he and his master ran into the forest, but they were followed by the prince's soldiers while the green men searched for them. And Leto sneak around the trees. In the meantime the elf counts soldiers and how many are with Kant, and the prince looking at Roar sees that he is indeed still a child. Either way he stays hidden, but looking at one of the soldiers he realizes that he's never seen him before. The presence of this one seems to be indeed terrifying, so much so that Sel identifies the danger and starts to growl, and Leto tells him to be quiet. Then the elf asks if the boy is ready. Leto asks if he will have to fight right now, as there are about 20 armed soldiers following them. Regardless, Kane presses on and calls for the prince, shouting his name. He asks if the prince is indeed trying to kill him and states that he's not scared at all. However, he claims to be surprised that a coward like him would show up on the front lines. Hearing this, the prince offers 1,000 gold coins for anyone who brings C's head. The elf stands still waiting for the enemies to advance, and when one of them attacks he simply defends with ease, and with a single counterattack he deals a fatal blow. Arrows are shot at C, but he uses the dead soldier as a shield. His dark sarcastic gaze indicates that he liked that, unlike the others who shot the arrows. However, the unknown warrior seems to have gotten even angrier. From afar, Leo watches the situation and realizes there are many enemies and wonders what would happen if the elf died, thinking that he could run away, but he soon realizes that if he dies the spiders and his body will devour him alive, so he has enough reason to help in the battle, especially since the prince is there, because Leto sees this as an opportunity to finish what he started and thinks that after killing him he will have revenge for his mother's death. The prince in turn is shocked that this number of soldiers is not able to kill Kane, yet he has a fallback plan should everything go wrong. But looking around he comes face to face with the one who hurt him before. K realizes that the boy is transforming and wants to take care of it right away, but the prince says that his job is to protect him from C. Then he talks about the protagonist as merely a slave and it shouldn't be too hard to take him down alone, precisely because he wants to retaliate eye for an eye. He also claims he will become king of the elves in the future, and with his sword he will cut down the protagonist just to show off his warrior talent, but his arrogance kept him from acting and he ended up taking a hit in the face again. In this time though, the protagonist had a rather large fork in the castle. Lady Ba stabs some cherries and says that Cam's castle has the best one. Similarly, the prince was stabbed again and lying on the ground he screams in pain. Roar tells the protagonist not to get close and vows to kill him, yet Leto however says that no matter how much pain the prince is in, it's not even comparable to his, as his family, friends and everyone he knew died because of the prince, so what he's feeling right now is nothing. While the prince cries and in front of the opponent his guard, in an effort to defend him, advances towards the protagonist. Leto is struck and hurled towards a tree. Due to the impact he feels a strong pain. Meanwhile, the guard approaches the prince. Roar in an extremely arrogant manner states that he is completely blind now and demands a doctor immediately. However, the guard apologizes and asserts that they do not have any doctor there, so they need to return to the castle for any type of treatment. Thus Khan takes the prince on his back and tells the soldiers that he is going to retreat and bring the prince back to the castle soon. It's up to the big guy to take the lead. Before leaving, the prince only tells them to ensure they capture the slave alive, for he wants to prepare his head and cut it off himself. The big guy tells two of the soldiers to take care of the boy and kill him before he fully transforms. Leto in turn prepares himself and waits for the guards to get closer, but what the enemies did not expect is that the boy was accompanied. His faithful squire catches them off guard, but while the Cerberus was attacking, other guards shot arrows at him, hitting him. Seeing this makes the protagonist concern about the dog. This leaves him vulnerable enough for one of the soldiers to strike him with his shield. With the boy on the ground, the enemy tries to kill him with his sword, but with his forked arm Leto protects himself. Even so, the soldier tells the protagonist to just relax, because he is going to kill him before he transforms into a Monster asserting that if he becomes one his brother will not recognize him anymore. Leto is almost gravely injured, but the enemy's words make him angry, so he tells the soldier to stop talking nonsense, and with the strength of anger he manages to deflect the sword with his fork arm until the sword begins to break and finally it is completely destroyed. The soldier does not understand how this happened, but being stunned he doesn't notice that the protagonist has approached and he impales his throat with the fork, saying that at this point he no longer cares about being compared to a monster as long as he can use that to kill his enemies. After tearing him apart, the protagonist admits he has indeed become a monster and gradually his transformation progresses. Thus he manages to go up high, leaving the other soldiers astonished, for he has indeed transformed into a real monster, not only in appearance but also in his actions. In another part of the forest, one of the soldiers watches from far, seeing one of his comrades being sliced in half. Without realizing it, he becomes the next target, and when he realizes it, it's already too late, for in the same way he was killed too. The others are extremely frightened, saying that 4 of their own were killed almost instantly, but one of them says that the main unit will arrive soon, so they just need to hold on a bit longer and move defensively, tiring him out until reinforcements arrive. However, the big guy approaches and simply tells them to get out of his way. Soon he says that he finally stands before Cain, the famous knife knight. He introduces himself as Worcester Folk and says he's heard many rumors about Cain. The elf asks what kind of rumors. Worcester says he's heard that Cain Ballstein is the only one remaining of the 13 most powerful warriors across the kingdom, so he asserts that he can witness the truth of the rumors. That's why he challenges him to a duel, but he says this while already attacking. However, Cain easily dodges and prepares a counterattack, yet Worcester is faster than he imagined and hits him straight in the face. He then throws Cain far away and prepares to attack him again. With his weapon he hits Cain, impressing the other soldiers who couldn't believe what they saw. Cain lying far away on the ground hears Worcester saying it's really a shame, because if he had been born 10 years earlier and joined the war, without a doubt he would have led the Red Army. His accomplishments and even his seat as the strongest knight of the remaining would have been his, but now that the wars against the humans have ended, there's no place for grand conquests anymore. However, if he wins this duel his reputation might increase. He claims that he'll become a young and handsome great warrior who single-handedly defeated the kingdom's traitor, and his name will forever be remembered. But his joy for a brief moment is cut short because Cain gets up and starts to laugh. Worcester asks what is so funny. Cain spits something onto the ground, one of his teeth that fell out from the blow he received, and he says that Worcester has too ugly a face to become what he desires. He doesn't like hearing that at all, and he advances, saying he would kill Cain. But when trying to strike his opponent he realizes that he has left his field of vision, and before he realizes Cain reappears and stabs him in the legs. Worcester falls to the ground, losing support in his legs. Then his opponent prepares to attack from above, and with his blades Cain tries to kill him, but Worcester still has strength in his hands and manages to defend himself. Cain remarks that the battlefield hosts creatures beyond imagination. It was a place where those prepared for death, regardless of their race, gathered. There were many people much stronger than Worcester. However, seeing a clueless novice like him talking about something he knows nothing about, it's hard not to laugh. Soon Cain leverages the powers of his armor to heat up his blades, and with that he gradually manages to melt the opponent's weapon. Worcester sees this and can't believe it, for a normal weapon should not be able to melt his armor. Now he knows that if he changes his position or loosens his hands, Cain's blade will go straight for his throat, so he orders the others to fire at the enemy. The soldiers are uncertain whether to do that or not. Cain tells him that this is due to the duel he himself proposed, and even for a king, interfering in a duel is an absolute taboo. He also says that Worcester would know this if he were a true warrior. However, realizing he's near death, Worcester begs for his life. Cain says that one of the reasons elves are known as a powerful race is due to their incredible regenerative ability. Thus, if you want to kill an elf you must bleed them beyond their regenerative capacity. An example is that like now you can cut off both arms. Worcester is desperate as he recognizes imminent death, but nothing stops him from losing his 2 arms. However, he still has not died, as Cain mentions that the most effective way against elves is to kill them by beheading, and so he does, finally killing his adversary. After Worcester's head detaches from his body, Cain addresses the other soldiers, saying there are no nobles watching them now. Soon they should Return to the castle if they hold their lives dear, for this is their last chance. The soldiers think it's better to flee and tell the prince that enemies manage to escape precisely knowing that if they decide to fight they will die, so they decide to do so, and one of them even comments that the knife knight is, as the rumors say, a monster. Another insists they would die even if they all attack together, and he still gets chills down his spine realizing such monsters roam the western battlefield. Cain watches them retreat to the castle, saying that Chiron has also grown significantly weaker and needs to find something to feed on. Then he tells the boy that they're leaving, but when calling the hero he gets no response. The elf looks around the forest and wonders where the boy ran off to, as he sees him nowhere, but seeing a corpse on the ground he notes that people infected by spiders like the boy become one of two options: a demon that adopts the powers received from the spider, or a monster consumed by power and loses its sanity. He also says that the hero had great potential and laments that it had ended this way. From a distance, tied to a tree, he spots the boy already transformed, already consumed by the transformation. The hero looks unrecognizable. The protagonist glares at him from a distance. Cain simply stands still looking at him. Leto, however, jumps from the tree and rushes towards the elf, something he was expecting, as the elf doesn't move, and as soon as the protagonist attacks he just defends. In Leto's vision things happen differently. He regards the elf as his enemy, saying after all what he did wasn't a big deal. Seeing the red knight fall he states that Cain should thank his lucky stars for being born an elf, but peeking at the ground again he doesn't see him anymore. Soon Cain appears in front of him and with just one hand strikes the protagonist, throwing him far away. Leto lies on the ground, and when he tries to move he can't. From the ground he can only see the glowing eyes from the elf's armor and gets angry about being unable to do anything. As he stares at the enemy he sees something much scarier than what he really is and remains paralyzed on the floor. Noticing the enemy's approach he screams, calling him a monster, but the elf tries to rip off his arm. Suddenly Leto panics about it and screams desperately in pain because cruelly and coldly his arm was torn off. He sees himself as if he were on a tray and the giant elf simply pointing a hand in his direction. The gigantic red hand grabs your arm and takes it towards its mouth, devouring the boy's arm. Leto can't believe what he sees, yet the monstrous creature says it enjoys the taste and savors what it just ate. Back in the forest, snow falls from the sky covering the whole area. Cain walks alongside cause Leto in turn is being carried by his dependable companion. He begins to wake from his strange dream, but when he opens his eyes he realizes his arm was actually ripped off. Then he tries to look ahead and realizes C is leading the dog. He realizes then that all things considered he is still alive, but his vision becomes blurry again and Leto once again loses consciousness. Afterward he awakens again and realizes he passed out once more. Upon waking he sees a gigantic monster before him. Looking at the creature he identifies it as a gigantic crab, however all he can think is that it would be delicious to eat it sometime later. He wakes up after having fainted yet again. Scared, the protagonist tries to comprehend the situation, but he doesn't even know where he is. He looks around and only sees strange objects surrounding him as well as a tube with weird organisms inside. He soon wonders where the mad elf went, however he comes across a severed head and he's super scared, saying that this is very terrifying, yet he doesn't notice something is behind him as well, and when he turns around he gets quite a shock. But it is nothing more than a blue-skinned girl. Leto, realizing it is one of the elves, charges at her and the girl simply comments that he made a decision quickly, but with a simple gesture she pulls a cord and escapes the boy's attack while hitting him with a dart in his neck, which makes him fall to the ground. Leto doesn't pass out but is paralyzed and wonders what's happening. She tells the protagonist that he should make sure to evaluate the situation carefully before attacking his opponent next time and check for hostility. If there, then how much is the gap? Simply put, gain insights on the other side. This is the use of the sixth sense. She also says that Leto is a complete rookie and knows nothing. Soon asks what Cain wants with a human like him. That's when the protagonist realizes she knows the elf. Then she says she's going to remove the paralyzing needle and he should behave so she can remove his spiders. Leto is doubtful about how she's going to do it, but she just says that means she is his lifesaver. After performing the procedure on the protagonist, the elf girl leaves the den. Once outside, Leto realizes he has been inside a giant crab all this time. He wonders if this is a dream. Suddenly Sandal appears, greets his friend. The protagonist says the dog is quite resilient and the girl says she has finished with his treatment, but Leto hears someone say he survived again and it seems that Lady Luck is on his side. Then he realizes it's Cain, saying he fulfilled the agreement, removing the spiders. from his body. From now on, the elf states the boy will serve as his shield till death. Leto thanks him but isn't sure if he'll be fine from now on. Either way, the girl calls him and shows him one of the spiders that was inside an egg stored in his stomach, saying it was about to implode. The protagonist is shocked to see the spider and learn that it was in his body. She says this spider has 2 horns on its head, being different from a normal spider. Then she asked how the spider that attacked him looked like, and how big it was. Leto can't answer properly as it was dark in the cave. The only thing he can affirm is it was twice his size. The girl is surprised and says that this is a significant discovery. Soon she wants to find the spider. Leto says it must be near Sem Castle, however C says going there is pointless as the spider had disappeared when he arrived. Thus the girl is frustrated, but there certainly were some male spiders with her, and it was not the typical. To a certain extent, the boy's right arm's extraordinary regenerative ability is understandable. Leto then looks at his arm and sees it back to normal. Now he finally realizes that what he thought was but a dream was indeed not, for his forked arm indeed was ripped off and served as sustenance for the armory of the elf. Cain says that it did not even take a whole day for a new arm to grow in its place. He claims it was the first time that Kieran had such a satisfying meal. Even now he is still trying to recover his taste buds. Cain also tells Leto that from now on his right arm will be Quinn's emergency food. The protagonist thinks this is dangerous and is no longer sure he would stay alive by being near the mad elf, then concludes he needs to make his escape as soon as possible. Leto thinks that right after the man and marked him as emergency food, he cut off 2 of his fingers and used them as food for his armor with the excuse of putting his regenerative abilities to the test. Then the protagonist feels the urge to murder him in the most agonizing way possible. As soon as he gets the chance, in less than an hour his fingers were nearly restored, and after this the crazy elf wanted to test the regenerative capacity of his left hand as well. Leto thinks that if it wasn't for the witch saying that only the right arm has quick regenerative power, then his left side would also have been cut off. The elf girl's name is Corn. She said she was a witch whom the protagonist only heard about through rumors. On the outside of the crab house, Corn hears about assassins with living armor. C says the armor of this assassin was not on par with Quarren, but it was definitely a living armor indeed. The girl wonders whether to acquire a living armor wouldn't the approval of the grandmas of witches be required, because an ordinary assassin couldn't just attain such a qualification. The protagonist is unsure about these living armors, but Core explains that these armors are literally alive. It's a suit that when worn shares the mind and body of the user, mutually improving their synergy. It adapts to the user's personality, changes accordingly, displays various functions, and becomes stronger. The definitive creation, which can only be created once in a witch's lifetime. How it was made is a secret, but she claimed she was responsible for creating C's armor anyway. The girl says she had never heard about assassins with living armors before and claimed she no longer has the same level of information gathering skills because she was banished from the Council of Witches. Cain says that's due to her lousy skills, but she says that's not it. The reason she was expelled is because she intruded on a secret meeting of the witches and was discovered. She questions whether it's necessary to make such a big deal about it, since she believes the suit of knowledge, the satisfaction of curiosity, is the essence of who she is, a witch. Moreover, she had been forbidden to have contact with any other witch for the next 5 years, which is a source of great regret. Cain, however, has his mind elsewhere. He can only think about the encounter he had with the assassin and the very last words the assassin said. He quickly concludes that perhaps it is because he has been on the battlefield for too long. However, something is happening beneath the surface of which he is not aware, but he claims he will uncover it eventually, then gets up and bids Corn goodbye. The girl says that if Cain is thinking about killing him, he must bear in mind that the prince will soon become king, and concludes that the king won't stand idly by. So she asks if Cain is planning to wage war against the king. He replies that as soon as he reunites with his army on the battlefield, he will get the prince's head and anyone who stands in his way, including the king. Hearing this makes the girl think that it's typical of Cain to say something like that. Next, the elf calls for the protagonist. However, Leo says he can't leave now because he must find his brother, who was captured and made a slave like him, but was eventually sold off. The protagonist says he heard he was sold to Sirin Castle, so he pleads with his master to let him find his brother, claiming he won't try to escape and will even hand over as many pieces of his right arm as necessary. After being stared down by the elf, the protagonist awaits a response. However, Cain just turns around and says they will be heading west. Immediately Leo gets frustrated with him, saying that he's not in the mood for games, and wants to find his brother above everything else. He would rather resist and make a scene than willingly go along. Now that they had reached this point, he thinks he will kill the elf and find his brother. Cain perceives his anger and asks if the boy is going to attack him. It is said next that if the boy takes a step forward he will die. Leto glares at the elf with great anger and Cain merely watches him closely. The boy's rage is strong, but amidst the confusion Corn appears and breaks up the fight. She says she heard that soon there would be a dance at Sirin's castle, the annual masquerade ball happening in 2 days. She also says that C always used to before returning to the battlefield. Leto thinks all this is nonsense and wonders if the elf goes to a ball to dance. C however wonders if that boy considers this. Regardless, he agrees to go to Sans castle for his own interests, and while he's there the boy can search for his brother. He then asks Corn to prepare some clothes for the protagonist, as he cannot appear there in his current attire. She is excited about this and thinks she will prepare something quite cool. Upon seeing the protagonist's dog she asks if he will also go, but still doesn't seem to understand her. A few moments after this conversation they leave the house and the girl announces she's finished. Soon Leto is seen in an outfit resembling a uniform. Upon seeing him C says he is minimally presentable and asks if he's ready to go. The protagonist says yes, as he wants to save his brother more than ever. That evening in Sirin, northeast of Kem Castle, in the middle of a human city also dominated by green people, some walk amidst the city's poverty, but the green people stand out among the humans and sell the children as slaves. Soon an appraiser takes a liking to a human child and buys him, but the seller is not happy with the payment, stating he needs to hunt them for his survival and therefore demands a higher payment for what he has brought, especially since there aren't many of them. The buyer states that it is not his problem. The aristocrats wishes to prevent the pure blood of the elves from mixing with other races, or at least that's what they say. That's why they only approve children. Either way, we will always lend a hand to a youngster like this, so bring more, for in Sans castle only young slaves are accepted. The seller then says he should pay a higher price for more slaves, but the buyer says he will do that next time. They both are suspicious of this response, but still they close the deal. Inside the castle, a noble elf savors a wine he likes quite a bit and comments that the ball is near. Meanwhile, someone addresses him as Count Pillar, saying that his mask is ready, adjusted adequately based on his suggestions. Then the Count asks him to bring it, and upon seeing the mask rates it as excellent, stating that with it he will shine like a star at the ball. Unlike Cain, the day of the ball has arrived and Count Pillar, the Northern Lord, is delighted. Looking to the side he comes across his sister Tyrell. The Cest introduces herself in her beautiful dress. She says this time more aristocrats have come than before, and her brother says that is because of the extent of his influence over them. Tyrell is astounded that they are enjoying a party while there is an ongoing war behind the scenes. Her brother spots a small detail on her dress and asks if she had been outside the castle again, and says when she sees the poor at least share a bit of food with them. She says she really doesn't understand how contradictory this world is, for while people like that live in luxury, others outside the castle struggle to survive. Blue, green, yellow, or any other color. She states they must shed their superficial masks and understand one another, otherwise the world will never change. The Count is surprised by this observation. Changing the subject, the Cest asks if Cain will appear at the party this time. He replies that he heard Cain would be near Cam Castle, so it's likely he will. With this his sister gets excited and calls for her maid, saying she needs to change and dress more appropriately for the party. However, on the way someone bumps into her and falls onto the ground. The person, still disoriented from the fall, looks at the Countess with a desperate expression and apologizes, but Tyrell doesn't like this at all and completely changes her attitude. She puts on gloves and asks people how she dares to touch her, saying she cannot forget ugly things like this. As punishment, the Countess violently assaults the person, and even though the victim begs for forgiveness, she does not stop. She tells the person to shut up, as just looking at his ugly face irritates her, asserting that she has ordered everyone to wear masks. After she finishes, she says that because of him blood stained her dress. With the victim lying on the ground, Tyrell resumes her previous demeanor, saying that she needs to dress properly for her beloved. Meanwhile, the ball continues in the hall with music playing as the nobles dance. All those in attendance are wearing masks, as it should be at a ball like this. One of the servants acting as a waiter complains about having to serve drinks all night, but another scolds him, saying he should speak more quietly. After this, the entire hall turns their gaze to a single person. He speaks to all present with the most grandiose of all the children of the albino god, the pillars and founders of the great elf kingdom. Please make this night be remembered forever. On seeing the Count, everyone is surprised as his mask and clothes are extremely fantastic. A lady even says there must be a deep significance to this masterpiece, and if the Count doesn't mind she would like to hear it personally. He thinks yes, as his goal was to have all eyes on him. He also thinks that Kane can appear whenever he wants because nothing will overshadow his brilliance tonight. As the Count is fawned over by the party's nobles who praise his appearance, the Countess gets ready and wonders where Kane is. At the castle gate some guards protect the entrance. One of them smells meat and wishes there would be something left for them to eat, but another guard tells him not to imagine such a thing because the nobles don't care about them. He soon concludes that he will eat porridge again, but they see someone approaching and think it can only be some vagabond. After this they tell the stranger that he must leave as there won't even be a piece of bread left for him. However, these were their last words because the one who arrived passed through the gate with ease. After arriving, Kane tells the protagonist to find his brother, and if he doesn't come back after the party he won't have another chance. Leto says he understood, and Kane warns him not to try to escape because he will kill him. The protagonist, however, can only focus on his mission, putting the elf aside for now. He knows that the slaves live in the back of a castle and that's where he needs to look, so he hopes that his brother can hold on just a little longer because he is coming to find him. Back at the party, Tyrell is still looking for Kane, but she doesn't see him anywhere and despairs, thinking that he might not show up, but she has a great desire to at least dance with him as she wants to feel the same sensation she had when she last saw him. The nobles begin to notice her despair but are soon surprised by something. The Count comes to talk to them but is brushed aside and wonders where everyone is going. However, he soon understands upon seeing Kane in the middle of the hall. The elf seems to understand the situation well and walks among the nobles of the party. Everyone recognizes him and knows of his great deeds. He is the only one who is not properly dressed and does not wear a mask, but that doesn't stop everyone from seeing him in a good light except for Count Pillar, who becomes furious when he realizes this, saying that it's a castle not a battlefield, and no matter if he's a war hero or something like that, everyone should respect the rules of dress and etiquette instead of showing up at a party in armor. Kane, upon hearing this, holds the face of his armor and pulls it off as if it were nothing. Immediately everyone is amazed by what they see because underneath his armor he was wearing nothing. Even the Countess is taken, albeit positively. The elf takes the face of his living armor and puts it on as if it were a mask. After doing this, an unexpected reaction occurs because through this simple part new clothes appear on his body with a living organism. The armor wraps itself around Kane, covering him entirely from head to toe. Meanwhile, Kane says it's been some time since he last saw Tai. She, however, is glad to see him. Then Kane kneels before her and invites her to dance elsewhere in the depths of the castle. Leto and Sel are looking for the humans running down the dungeon corridors. He wonders whereon is. He also wonders if his brother was killed just because he was blind, but at the same time he wishes this hadn't happened. However, after running a bit, the protagonist stops for a moment upon coming across a cage and seeing people inside in terrible conditions. This sight leaves him shocked and for a moment even loses strength in his legs, for the people he sees have their skin peeled off, and just imagining that his brother could have suffered the same fate leaves him feeling numb. But then Sandal notices a present. Someone appears and asks if the boy likes what he saw. He claims he is almost certain that he was the only one who managed to peel off a skin so well. The peeled skin is then used to make masks. The younger the person is, the softer the skin. He also asserts that the protagonist's skin is good due to his youth. Then he tells a Cyclops named Bu to keep the boy's skin intact while the rest will serve as his food. Soon the Cyclops finds the determination needed to capture him. While the dance is happening, Kane observes the nobles and it seems they are doing the same, keeping their eyes attentive to him and the Countess. This makes Kane think that there are people who seem not only interested in the ball. Tyro likes this and claims that more aristocrats are participating in the party this year. Noticing he returned to the kingdom, he asks if that means the war has ended. Kane responds that it has not and there are still humans remaining. However, there is another reason why he returned from the battlefield. The Countess asks what motivated him to return, and guesses she might be the reason. However, C says he returned only to kill Prince Romer. She does not understand and thinks it is a joke. Kane claims he is not joking and he takes down anyone standing in his way, but she says he should not worry as she will stay by his side. On the other side, the Count is also dancing, but in anger he harshly grabs a lady's hand. She says she does not know what the Count has been doing all this time as he is not even paying attention to her. She will soon look for another partner who is a gentleman. The Count becomes furious and thinks that everyone was focused on him. Before C arrived, and he does not want to let his rival be the center of attention all the time. Pillar can feel this. Everyone seems to be enjoying the ball, but they are subtly observing C. While aware of this, they are silently looking at C as if he was the star of the stage, but the Count feels his deserved spotlight has been stolen and cannot forgive his rival for this. Across the hall, his sister is dancing with C. To the rhythm of the music, she gets involved, thinking that her feelings are further surfacing. Her total focus is on Kane as they spin against each other like a whirlwind. She thinks that this is the final moment when the two merge into one and wishes that this time was just for the two of them in this space. Even the concept of time is lost. Soon she imagines herself in the center of the universe, dancing along with her lover as if the two of them truly were the center of attention for all the stars, something that at least at the party becomes reality as all the attendees watch the couple until at the end of the dance they give a standing ovation for their performance. Kane gazes closely at the Countess and her eyes shine when she sees him, for she imagines that he is a star that she would like to reach just once. But before anything more romantic could happen, they are interrupted by the Count, who in turn is in armor and accompanied by guards. One of the nobles asks what the Count is doing, for it is rude to bring weapons to a party. Angry Pillar tells him to be quiet. The ball has ended and he has an important announcement to make. He says he was just informed about a decree of the kingdom and asks one of his men to recite it. The guard does so and reads that a knight's oath is a promise to defend the kingdom and protect the king. Breaking the oath is a grave offense because it is equal to betraying the king and the kingdom, as well as denying the albino god knight Cain Balin for the crime of murdering the king must be sentenced to death. Tyrell asks what his brother is saying as he does not believe that Cain killed the king. Other nobles do not believe it either, as they have not heard news of the king's death. They even think it's some kind of joke, wanting to go to the capital to check for themselves. Yet the Count yells, asserting that the king is dead. It also says that Cain is the only knight who returned from the battlefield, making him even more suspected of having killed the king. Upon hearing that, Cain realizes why he was called back, concluding that the prince's plan from the start was to kill the king and lay the blame on him, and judging from what was said, the king must indeed have died. He wonders why the prince wants to usurp a throne that would already be his, eventually saying that Roar is impatient, but he's careless, as the elves there will not believe him precisely because of Cain, who was at the forefront and championed the superiority of the elves more than anyone else. The nobles present indeed cannot believe this and wonder why a war hero would perform such an act. However, the Count asserts that Cain would have several reasons for doing this, and now he says that he will reveal the secret of this war hero, alleging that recently a witch discovered a curious fact about Cain, and according to what was discovered, Balstein is a mix of elf and human, not being a pure blood, therefore he would be just a human wearing an elf mask. But even Cain does not believe this and wonders if he heard correctly what the Count just said. Nevertheless, Pillar says that it is time for Cain to be repaid. All the humiliation he deserves for his gravest sin was discovered today, and he will witness the end of his rival. After this he orders that Cain be killed. Then soldiers who were in disguise remove their fancy clothes and start attacking. Then the other nobles ask what's happening. Cain, however, expected something like this to happen, and hopes to have the opportunity later on to ask the Count directly about the nonsense he said, but now he wants to enjoy what comes next. Back in the castle's dungeon, in the dark corridors, the Cyclops tries to catch the protagonist. Leto, however, does not bow his head in this situation. Despite the danger, he does not flinch, but this does not prevent him from being struck in the middle of the fight. His fork arm reappears, but the boy is struggling to use it as he has not yet fought an opponent like this before. The one responsible for the Cyclops is surprised that the protagonist is a curse bearer and did not expect his arm to change. He says that he's heard that those who are cursed become very strong when they turn into monsters, but he realizes that the boy has not fully transformed. Even so, he says that he will not give the protagonist a chance to fight back, as he and his dog have no chances against his Cyclops, since it is used on the battlefield against large armies, especially this one that the creator trained from a young age. He also asserts that this guy does not judge him based solely on his appearance. He is someone who looks at his interior as well. Leto, however, can only focus on how big and strong the enemy is, so beating him won't be easy. So he tries to devise a strategy. He is not sure how to do this, but thinks he needs to get stronger like he did last time, as this is the only way. The protagonist remembers the conversation he had with Korn before they set off, when she said that he was lucky to return to normal after fully transforming, for if Cain had not helped him he could permanently lose his sanity and never be able to return to what he was before. This leaves Leto puzzled as he wishes to return to normal to find his brother. Then he thinks about using the surrounding scenery to his advantage, and considering the characteristics of the enemy he imagines that fire might be useful. Considering an alternative, he sees that Sel has assumed his most aggressive form, and he promptly remembers that Korn said that the Cerberus was very talented. Then the protagonist should train him. Leto and Sel face the enemy. The protagonist knows that Cuirass have the ability to transform their bodies and make them larger because it cannot be changed at will. Training is required. They can also mimic sounds that they hear directly. Not only that, but other incredible abilities too. Another thing they have is the ability to read the thoughts of people close to them and mimic them with a sound. Leto even remembers the time when he thought something bad about his master and the Cuirass repeated it out loud. The elf even gets a scare after hearing the Rudis. With this, Leto tried to disguise it the best way he could, and after that day Leto's wrist became his armor. Back to the fight, Leto gears up and converses with Sandalin, thoughts telling him to attack at his signal. On the other side, the boss of the Cyclop orders him to advance. He attacks, but the protagonist manages to dodge. After that, he manages to counterattack and stab the Cyclops in the legs, but he notices that he didn't pierce enough to incapacitate him, so he gives the signal for the dog to attack, and so Sandal advances towards the ogre. Leto holds the Cyclops back to prevent him from fleeing, but he realizes that his dog could be hit directly. Then he screams as if the elf was about to come. Upon hearing that scream, the Cyclops becomes frightened. Soon he shrinks, escaping the blow. However, he grows after landing. The protagonist says that his dog shrinks at the hearing of a word that reminds him of that crazy elf. He then orders Sel to attack again, but the owner of the ogre notices that he has become the target. Soon he attacks the dog, but Sle manages to bite the enemy's hand and takes the torch he was holding. Thus the enemy is left without a torch, and he panics because now he's in the dark. Not only that, but all the torches in the hallway were put out, so the enemy realizes that the boy knows that Cyclops do not see well in the dark. He says that's right, as his brother is also blinded by illness. He can easily tell just by observing his behavior, the color and shape of the eyes. Leto knows that the Cyclops is not completely blind, but now with the lights out he won't see anything. Soon he will become more vulnerable to the attacks. The owner of the Cyclops orders him to attack, and even without seeing fully he manages to hit the protagonist. Leto definitely feels the pain of the impact as he was pressed against the wall, and then he was thrown by the monster. The enemy says that although the Cyclops' eyes are not good in the dark, his work just fine, and with that he can direct the attacks. Afterward he tells the Cyclops to listen to his voice and attack where he commands. Leto is frustrated to have his attack interrupted and feels the pain of the blow he took, but now he's ready. His focus is to find the location of where his brother is, but to do that he has to get past the enemy. So the owner of the Cyclops realizes that his Re is vulnerable, because he thinks that the protagonist will keep the Cyclops busy and will have the Cuirass attack him from behind. So you thought you could subdue the Cyclops by killing me? He asks, assuring himself that he needs to stay as close as possible to the Cyclops. Leto however orders Sandal to act as a mimic and says the enemies are on the right, so that's where he should go. In the meantime, the owner of the Cyclops just tells the monster to focus on his voice. Back in the banquet hall, heads are rolling, and all are cut off by Cain. The enemies advance towards him, but they are no match for a veteran war hero. With his sharp blades he slices everyone who approaches, leaving no room for them to attack. Cain is even enjoying doing so because the enemies don't pose a real threat to him, as he easily defeats the enemies. The others watch him and wonder what got into Count Pillar. He in turn orders one of his men to hold his sister because she wants to stop Cain from being killed and claims that he is not responsible for the king's murder. But at the same time she remembers him saying earlier that he wanted to kill the prince, and this creates confusion in her mind. In the fight, one of the remaining men becomes puzzled because he is surprised to see his companions dead. He then decides to use another strategy. Equipped with a weapon in his sleeve along with the others, they launch harpoons at K. The elf was somewhat distracted but soon realizes that the ropes have caught onto his armor in such a swift manner that it took him a moment to notice. Soon he is bound in various directions and the men try to incapacitate him. Cain however does not flinch for a moment. He just remains steady in his current position and soon sees that one of the enemies is advancing, but as he tries to attack him with a knife, the enemy is surprised by what happened because Cain managed to stop the knife attack with his teeth. Not only that, but the force was so great that he managed to break the blade and disarm his opponent, and then uses the very blade against him to kill him. The others also try to advance, and Cain equips himself with his blades, but those who stayed in the rear prevent him from moving his arms through the rope, so the elf realizes that he will have to use another strategy. Quickly one of the soldiers tries to approach Cain from behind him and strike him. The nobles upon seeing this think that this will be his end. Even the Cest despairs, yet quickly Cain manages to escape from this situation and defeats the enemies with ease. For his armor has eyes all over, but he wonders if perhaps he was poisoned. Either way, the count asks for a weapon from one of his men. He says that this is a special weapon made with tie and steel and wants to use it to drill a hole in Cain's head. Then he throws the spear at his opponent. Meanwhile is still tied up, but he realizes the looming danger. Soon he knows he's cornered and will have to think fast to get out of this. The spear merely hit Cain's shoulder instead of his head and quickly landed on the other side of the hall. Pillar is furious because of this, since he only missed due to his sister's intervention. Tyrell apologizes to him but couldn't stand by and watch it happen. Then she tries to escape from the guard's grip and with a kick manages to hit him. After that she tears part of her dress off to lighten the weight and heads towards Cain. Halfway there she encounters one of those holding the ropes and with a precise blow incapacitates him. Then she heads towards another and does the same. Finally she gets close to her beloved and asks everyone to stop attacking him. The count tells her to get out of the way, but Tyrell refuses to do so. Pillar says that even though his sister carries his blood, taking part in a betrayal will warrant her execution. However, she insists that this must be a misunderstanding, as Cain would never do what he's being accused of. Suddenly the elf gets up and whispers in the countess' ear that it's all right. She likes that but is worried about him. But what she didn't anticipate is that Cain would attack her with his blade and asks why he did this. He replies that he does not want anyone to interrupt his fun. Right after Tyra falls wounded to the ground and her brother grows even more hateful towards Cain. After this he orders all the remaining soldiers to keep their enemy. Cain realizes that the soldiers with tied and steel equipment are drawing near while the poison is spreading throughout his body, making everything even more dangerous. But this triggers a different feeling in him, one that he has not felt for a long time, the sensation of tension after crossing the battle line, as if he were walking on a death tightrope. However, he really doesn't think he can die now and tells Kieran to unleash some of his power. The armor asks how much he wants to release. Can answers that just one seal for now. This level would be exciting and fun enough for him. Back in the deep corridors of the castle, Sandala's fallen after a blow from the Cyclops, who is hitting everything in front of him. Angry Leo tries to attack him and manages to hit the giant's back. With this the protagonist finally manages to pierce him enough and hopes that this will kill him straight away, but while it did cause him damage, the Cyclops is still standing. However, gradually he's losing strength as his blood spills from his body. Then he loses his grip and falls face first to the corridor floor. Although he finally managed to defeat his enemy, Leto also loses his strength from the exhaustion of battle, but as he closes his eyes he sees someone approaching in his peripheral who calls him brother. Although this might have been only a figment of his imagination, it gives him strength to get up. He then faces the master of the Cyclops, who is falling, having been struck. Lamenting this, but before he even gets a chance to do anything, Leto with his pitchfork arm gravely wounds him and asks where he is. The MK man doesn't quite understand what he wants, but the protagonist wants to know where his brother is. He mentions that his brother arrived there as a slave about 3 months ago and is 12 years old. His name is Aiden, but the enemy says that many slaves come there and he can't remember all their details. Leto, however, says that his brother is blind and this detail alone should be enough for the man to remember, otherwise he'll die right there. The enemy says that if there has been a blind person there, he hasn't heard about it because all the slaves go through his care and he doesn't know where the boy's brother is. Leto tells him to stop lying, as he has information that his brother was sold to that place, and if the enemy wants to stay alive he should tell what he knows right away. However, the man insists he is not lying, in that if the boy's brother is not there he was likely ambushed by other humans on the way to the castle, for there are groups of humans who occasionally attack and rescue slaves on their way from there. Perhaps his brother was one of these. Soon the man affirms that Leto must find these humans in order to find his brother. This is all he knows. Next he takes off his mask, revealing that he is a human as well. Therefore he tries to appeal to the protagonist to release him. Leto, however, asks how he could do such horrendous things to people of his own species. He responds that the other humans do not see him as an equal precisely because he is half-blood, and for this he was always tortured, even having one of his eyes injured. He also says that 5 years ago he Became the leader of the humans who arrived at the castle. He also arrived as a slave but had his talent recognized, but Leto gets up and leaves saying that he is not interested in hearing his story. He takes Sandel in his gentlest form and says that they need to find the elf and leave there to look for his brother as soon as possible. Behind him he leaves the traitorous human with his mask split in half on the ground. Back at the hall the Count pleads for his life. Fork managed to attack him and says he will answer all his questions honestly if he wants to stay alive. He also says that Pillar's heart is right in front of the tip of his blade. If he lies he will know. The Count asks what Cain wants to know. In his thoughts he wonders why his enemy has so much power. In turn C asks about what he said about his blood, wanting to know if it was a lie or not, but Pillar affirms that it was not a lie, and Cain realizes that he is telling the truth. The Count affirms that he must know that witches have been conducting experiments to determine who is pure-blooded or not in the elven race. One way to recognize a half-breed is another skin color apparent on some part of the body, but that is not the only way, as some have completely single-colored skin. Another distinguishing feature would be yellow eyes and hair color, same as CES. In this way Pillar claims that C now realizes he is half-human, therefore warriors, aristocrats, witches and all will try to kill him. The Count also says that in the end he will be the boss among the elves, but this will not happen because in pain C tears him in half, splitting Count Pillar in two. The shocking revelation left him extremely furious. Cain was seen as a star by his beloved. It's someone she would like to reach, but as she approaches him what she feels is blood falling on her face and remembers her brother calling her. She also remembers Cain attacking him and splitting Pillar in half in her room at the castle. She wakes up from the nightmare she had and asks how long she has been asleep. One of those present replies that she has been asleep for almost an entire day, and she also asks about her brother. He says that the Count was killed by C and the funeral will take place the next day, so she realizes that what happened was not just a nightmare. When the yellow-skinned humans are dead they are reborn in the next life as Vules. When the green-skinned VKS are dead they are reborn as elves. And finally when our blue-skinned elves are dead they are reborn as angels of white light. At least this is what the master of ceremony says at the funeral, claiming that the beings of light will dwell for eternity next to the great albino god. Therefore he states that the others need not be sad and they also do not need to miss the deceased. Tile on the other hand did not attend the ceremony. Instead, while she is preparing she says that her brother was her only true family, and despite his terrible hobby she affirms that her brother never stopped taking care of her. So she wants to return the favor and dedicate to him what she is about to do. The Countess cuts her own hair, affirming that she will go after Cain, for she wants her revenge by making Cain fall in love with her and love her forever. Thus he would be trapped in her heart forever. Speaking of the devil, he is outside far away from the castle contemplating the view of the horizon while remembering Pillar's last words, saying that he was not a pure-blood elf, and that everyone in and the kingdom will come after him. In a way Cain even likes to know about this, as his sadism makes him imagine what such a situation would be like, and because of this he bursts into hearty laughter. Just imagining what it would be like makes him happy in such a way that he eagerly anticipates the arrival of that day. He thinks that when everything was becoming boring something fun appeared to entertain him, and this completely elated him, giving a new reason to act. Now he has more things to do, but before he accomplishes anything he says he needs to find the protagonist, for if he fled he will fulfill the promise he made to find and kill him. We see the protagonist, who is already out of the castle thinking about the mad elf. He imagines he must be upset about his disappearance. However, Leto only wants to get stronger to face him someday and is definitely determined to kill him. Being alone he takes the opportunity to shout and curse the elf loudly. Now that he has vented, Leto wants to focus on finding his brother, for if he really was transferred from the castle but was captured on the way, then there should be clues that can reveal his whereabouts. The protagonist knows he may encounter some Vul along the way, but thinks that being stronger now it wouldn't be a problem to have to face them, for with his powers he could easily kill them. For a brief moment he remembers the traitorous human from the castle and recalls that he felt nothing for killing the Versus, but for some reason he is resentful towards the human. Then he tries to imagine that the enemy of the past was not just a human but one that was half Voke. This makes him deal more easily with this situation, because killing anyone who is a Voke, even if only half, should not make him sad. Night comes and Leto is still walking through the forest until he finds a water source, so he uses it to drink, but it soon starts to rain, making him think he has to find a shelter near where he was. Leto sees a cave, and that is exactly where he stays, setting a fire soon after. and sheltering with his dog for a moment while holding cell. He remembers his mother and calls her while sleeping, but suddenly he hears something and slowly opens his eyes. Then he realizes that this cave already was a habitat for some other living being, as a bear comes to claim what is his, but where some see danger. The protagonist sees an opportunity easily. He defeated the animal and even used its meat as food. To his surprise, the taste was quite good. He knows it was said that humans attacked the slave traders, so he imagines that a fight must have erupted. There must certainly be some traces somewhere. Sand barks at him and Leo realizes that the dog is already feeling better. However, the dog does more than just bark, it also runs after something. Leto asks where he is going, saying he can get lost in such a place, but the protagonist realizes that the dog might have smelled something. Soon after, he sees that Sandal found a human body, already rotten, and wonders how long it has been there. He also concludes that this cannot be one of the humans who saved his brother. While examining the body, he hears someone walking near the trees. It was a girl who apparently gets scared at the sight of a human, then she starts running in the opposite direction to the protagonist. However, Leto yells for her to wait and follows her. He says it is dangerous there and needs to kill her before any other VKS come looking for her. The girl does not notice a stone in her way and ends up tripping, dropping her fruit basket. She tries to get up after hitting her head and laments her apples which she spent all day picking, but in her distraction the protagonist appears ready to attack her. Leto tells her to blame her luck for being born of oak. However, the girl shows no fear because she sees that someone appears behind the protagonist to help her, which also surprises Leto. The protagonist wakes up later with a bucket of water in his face and realizes that he is all tied up. The girl says that he finally woke up. Leto, however, cannot say anything as even his mouth is covered. She is still scared of seeing a human so close. On the other hand, the protagonist tries to recall what happened and remembers the big guy who stopped him from attacking the girl. He wonders if this guy would be a human hunter and also wonders why he didn't kill him when he had the chance. Either way, he knows that he needs to escape and imagines that he can free himself using brute force. However, the big guy shows up and tells him not to do that. The girl calls him father and he tells Leto that there's a reason for him being tied up. The girl's father says he restrained him so he wouldn't become a complete monster, although he says he has no intentions of harming the protagonist and that he will free him. His daughter says that he is cursed and wonders what will happen if he transforms, but the father says that he was not sure before, but now he knows that he is not a monster for he can control his abilities unlike a common cursed one. And by the way, he also says that the dog is fine. This makes Leto wonder what these people want, wishing to kill them as soon as he is freed. However, in the background he sees a silhouette of someone who is looking for the girl, saying that they cannot walk up to her. Upon seeing this person and by the voice, the protagonist immediately recognizes his brother. Alvin in turn also recognizes Leto's voice, so the protagonist runs to his brother and gives him a tight hug. They both cannot believe they have found each other again. However, their reunion is moving even for the Vogs because the girl's father realizes that this encounter did not occur by mere chance. 2 months ago, some slave traders were debating whether or not they would make money selling a blind boy. One of them says that this does not concern him because if they sell him to the sand castle they will earn up to 3 times the price, as they need the skins. However, they end up falling into an ambush. The humans were many and they considered fleeing and pushing the slaves off the cliff, and so Alvin says he lost consciousness, and when he regained his senses these people had already saved him and he stayed with them ever since. The family's mother serves food to everyone and tells Alvin to be careful because it's hot. She serves the protagonist too, but realizes that Leto is not comfortable there. She freezes for a moment, however she still treats him kindly. The father tells Leto to at least try it, arguing that it is better than barley porridge. Leto stares at the served food and wonders what it is. The girl notices his hesitation and asks if he thinks it is poison, saying that he is not very insightful. Even his brother insists that he tried the food. The protagonist has doubts and wonders what is happening there because he is sitting at the table with Vul and they are even sharing a meal. This makes him think he is doing something wrong. In any case, he participates in the meal, but at nightfall he goes to his brother and asks him to silently follow. Even though Alvin does not want to leave, the protagonist argues that these people are Vuels, the same kind as those who attack villages. Leto affirms that they can't know when they will turn against them and attack. However, Alvin says this is not true. He resists, but his brother insists for him to get up because they cannot stay there. But Alvin does not want to leave. He says he is scared and affirms that he cannot see anything and that his brother was not with him all the time and did not witness what these people did for him, because Alvin claims that this family helped him and took care of him all this time. After this, the family's father appears and says that it is hard for the boy to run around because his bones are not yet strong and he needs a few more weeks to recover. He also says that Alvin is free to go whenever he wants, but it would be better for him to say goodbye before leaving forever. The protagonist asks the man what the reason for his generosity is, because normally verses would not help someone like his brother. He agrees that he is a Voke and says the protagonist and his brother are humans. However, he doesn't care about this difference. Elsewhere under the starlight, some humans walk down a road until one of them asks if it is okay to go west because of the battlefield. The leader says the east is inhabited by humans because the elves have taken over the entire region and impose rules. Therefore the humans that die or end up becoming slaves, so the west would be their only option because there is at least a remnant human army. But in this distraction the child is the only one to notice something and tells his mother that there are 2 moons in the sky. However, the mother realizes that danger is near because the leader died in the blink of an eye and the others didn't even see where the attack came from. But when they look at the water of a river they notice an unusual movement. Soon what seems to be a pair of glowing eyes leaves everyone, properly scared of the imminent danger. Then realizing that the danger is in the water, they try to run, thus they do, attempting to escape however possible. But what they didn't expect is that the enemy is also fast. Some offer to stay and fight the threat to buy time for the others to escape. However, even they cannot escape death, for with a side the killer who once pursued Cain is now hunting these humans and defeating them without difficulty. None of them stand a chance of escaping, and so they try to beg for their lives, but even children are not spared. After defeating all the humans, the killer returns to the water, and after a rest he emerges from the pond. He calls home and dries his living armor. After this he removes his mask, exposing his face to the open air, revealing himself to be another one of the elves. Someone approaches and says that Cain is still alive. Lady B shows up to warn the Swear that K is a dangerous elf. Thereupon they need to deal with him as swiftly as possible, and the lady even offers the help of other assassins. However, the Sidek killer states that he will kill Cain alone and asks her not to interfere. Lady BA argues that it would only make sense if he was to beat him with his own strength, thus he could at least cleanse himself somewhat of the sin of his blood mixed with human blood. She also mentions that the king has died and Prince Roar will soon be crowned, but he is foolish and cowardly, so exploiting him will be easy. Hence, when Romer becomes king, she will be a great asset in locating him and his wish will be fulfilled correctly. In Tendon, the capital city of the Elven Kingdom, the prince remembers the conversation he had with the king, where the father is surprised that a human was able to injure his eye. He claims he sent Roar to Cam near the battlefield to make him more resilient, but still he remains unchanged. Moreover, the king asserts he never imagined his son conspiring with a witch like Bee, for he always warned him about this kind. He also mentions that the prince doesn't quite grasp how dangerous this situation is. Lastly, he tells his son to return to the battlefield and seek help from the remaining knights and to keep watch over the albino's palace, for when he dies it is Roar who will take charge of everything. Thus the king lays down back in the present. His body remains in the coffin. The prince says his final goodbye to his father and tells the servants they can close the coffin. Shortly thereafter, the master of ceremonies before the vast nobility of the kingdom crowns Roar as the new king. All those present witness his crowning, and now that Roar is the new king he begins to earn some disdain since his reputation is not so good. After the ceremony, seated on the royal throne, he is irritated as many were whispering about him. Before long he is bothered by the news that a human slave managed to wound him, and he knows he will be recognized as the king who didn't use his sixth sense. Not only that, but everyone was glaring at him. Hence he ordered is caught to find the slave, for he wants to kill him with his own hands. His anger only increases as he knows his eye is taking long to regenerate. Then he asks if Lady BA also heard about the recent developments, for he heard that Cain appeared at Castle Cin, killed his cousin Count Pillar and then vanished. He also recalls that Lady had promised to handle this regardless. He asserts that he doesn't need assassins anymore, because now he will make his own moves. Lady BA states that now Roar is king. She trusts that he will fulfill his promise. He confirms but asks her what the witches are constantly seeking. She tells his majesty that he comes from a lineage of witches, hence they live according to their leadership. She also comments that the supreme leader of the witches, the esteemed Grand Witch, is the one who thirsts for knowledge and surpasses anyone. The language in ancient race the albinos used for the witches, that language is the world's most notable. Lady Bari asserts That many of the ancestral ruins are to the west on the battlefield, and she's sure those ruins hold records of the ancient language, therefore she wished to ensure those ruins are found and requests permission to go search for them. However, the new king declines and asserts he will go there himself. He contends that the war against the humans will extend and medical records are scheduled to be sent soon. During the delivery he coordinated some soldiers and will head to the battlefield to search for the ruins. With this the lady says that he made a wise decision. Now he wishes to rest from the exhausting coronation and asks her to leave, and so the lady does, retiring from the throne room. In the meantime, Kant thinks that the king is indeed dead, and he didn't imagine that the witch's powers were so potent. He then imagines that this situation might become even more dangerous. Roar says that's exactly why he will personally go to the battlefield, as he believes that it is safer than his own castle. K says that this is their current war, and if His Majesty coordinates the soldiers and wins, soon his reputation will increase and he will gain influence. Now as the new king, Roar is determined to put an end to the witches and the bee family. Not only that, but the entire Red Army and anyone who disdains him. Back to the protagonist's core, the Voke girl throws a stick just to play with Samuel, but she ends up hitting Leto's face. The dog picks up the stick afterwards and the girl apologizes. Leto looks at his dog and notices that he is really happy playing. Then the girl's father tells them to leave soon. Leto and the girl go somewhere after advancing through the forest, and at all times Leto keeps checking the sides. The girl realizes and tells him not to get nervous, because they won't abandon him. The father says there is no one there but his family, so the protagonist has nothing to worry about. Leto affirms that he will leave as soon as his brother recovers. The girl says that the protagonist should be grateful that they took care of his brother. Leto says that's why he agreed to help, be it cutting trees or collecting water. After some walking, the father spots his target, honey butter, claiming the taste is excellent. He also says that Alvin will recover faster after eating it, but first they need to collect the honey, and the protagonist offers to do this, but by trying to do this he ends up all swollen from the bee stings. The girl laughs a lot at his face. Then they hunt some animals and the father ends up catching a rabbit. Later on they go looking for firewood, and later everyone sits down at the table to eat. At dusk they lay down to sleep and Alvin asks his brother if he's really leaving. The protagonist responds that once his legs improve he'll take him to the place where humans live. Alvin, however, affirms that he likes it there, but his brother says that they cannot mingle with the Vul precisely because they are different from humans, so Alvin says that he doesn't feel different from them. Next morning, in a day of work, the father talks with the boy and calls him to go somewhere for a while. Leto asks what's wrong. The father asks if he has ever heard of the sixth sense. He responds affirmative and knows that the elf already spoke about it, but asks why he is mentioning this. In response, the father says that the sixth sense is beyond the other five, and says that if the boy trains it enough his five senses will improve simultaneously. In other words, his abilities will become stronger. To demonstrate, he gives a strong punch and splits a tree in half. The noise is so loud it even scares the birds. Leto is impressed that he was able to break such a resilient tree with just his hands. The father says that the crucial point is that Leto can use the spider's powers to become even stronger, and he is willing to teach him how to control his sixth sense. We use our five senses when assessing someone, their voice and so on. It takes more than their features to really understand someone. It includes their inner thoughts, feelings. Hence comes the ability to perceive someone by the sixth sense. Leto asks if practicing the sixth sense will improve it and also resists the power of spiders. The father replies that he can't guarantee this, but it will be useful. The protagonist asks if he will really learn the sixth sense if he stays there with them. Answering, the father says that usually the sixth sense awakes in extreme battles, however his method doesn't involve this. He also says that to obtain the sixth sense he must first know his opponent, thus through this it will be possible to learn more about this ability. This doesn't make much sense to the protagonist. Leto wonders if the father meant discovering your opponent's weakness and using it against him. From the face that the boy made, the father deduces that he understood. Next he looks up at the sky and realizes that it's going to rain soon. He quickly decides it's better to start training. The following day, as the rain falls on the site, the father's axe rests on a stump and they return home. Someone tells the story about the creation of the world. It is said that at the beginning of everything there was only one white light. Darkness tried to swallow the light, but the light resisted the light, then split into colors, and the world was created. In this World. The first intellect UAL species was born after this. The girl says that it is the end as the records end here. She states that the ancient species was called Alina, but as it is an extinct species it can only now be seen through records and one cannot help but wonder how they went extinct. However, the hero says that she is reading the wrong book for it is full of lies. She says that this book was written by a great adventurer and philosopher named Jana Elliott and claims that the hero is an ignorant who knows nothing. She further mentions that as expected humans are dumb and there is no helping them and probably her father is only assisting because of his brother. Alvin asks if this albino race really existed. The girl confirms this. She also talks about traces of their existence in ruins on the western outskirts. Leto asks if she has seen this herself. She replies no but claims to be telling the truth. However, Alvin is the only one who believes. The girl also mentions that it's currently a huge battlefield, but she would like to visit the place someday and she would also like to write a colorful book in the future. Alvin comments that this idea seems good but he is the only one who thinks so. The next day dawns with clear weather and as promised the father prepares to train the protagonist. Leto is extremely uncomfortable and asks if they are really training, claiming that for days they have done nothing but stare at each other, stating it's uncomfortable and weird to keep looking like this. The father says that the eyes are the window to the soul and understanding the opponent is the basic principle for the sixth sense, claiming that only then will the boy be able to feel it. He also states that it's as if he was seeing the world in grayscale. 3 days pass after this and Alvin tells his brother that he would like to try walking today, so Leto agrees to walk a little with him. Afterwards he asks how his brother's leg is and whether he feels any better. He replies that he feels good and can even stand on one leg. Leto says that is good since they will be able to leave soon. Alvin asks exactly where they are going. His brother replies that they are going west where the remaining humans are. The protagonist further declares that he is aware that the battlefield is dangerous but he is confident that staying in the human colony is safer than staying there. Then he tells Alvin to stand still for a while. However, his younger brother asks why but the protagonist just tells him to wait. He moves away a little and says that part of his training is to observe his opponent, so it should be easy to do this with his brother, claiming that Alvin is the best. However, from afar another boy, Voke, sees them and identifies them as humans, thus he runs away instantly, saying that he has to report this to the human hunters to get a reward. But it doesn't take long for the protagonist to catch him. As soon as he was captured, the boy gets scared seeing the protagonist arm and promises that he will not tell anyone about what he saw. Alvin asks his brother if everything is okay and if there is anyone else there. However, Leo just tells him to back off, claiming that it is a dangerous folk and he needs space to kill him. However, Alvin tells him not to do that. The protagonist's anger is so great that he ignores his younger brother. However, before he could do anything, the girl Voke from before appears and stops him from killing the younger one. Then she wonders if the protagonist is crazy. After this they return home and all sit together at the table. The mother asks how the Voke boy got so close to them. The father is unsure but says that the child was probably just looking for food. Their daughter, however, says that the protagonist was planning to kill him and states that the boy is probably the same age as her younger brother, calling him crazy. Leto, however, says that if the child told what he saw to others, he and his brother would be in danger, blaming the girl for losing sight of him. The girl says she only did that to save the boy from death, but Leto insists he would do anything to survive, even if it meant killing Elv or Vules. The girl quickly remarks that it was pointless for her father to have saved him and hopes that the protagonist will encounter an elf and die. The mother apologizes for what her daughter said and tries to talk about her older brother, but her husband interrupts her and says now isn't a good time. He also tells the protagonist to leave his house at sunset because, as the protagonist himself said, they are in danger. Leto just agrees with him. After the sun sets, a crowd walks through the place where an army of VKS is marching until one of them hears a call. The boy from before appears running and as he approaches says that some humans were nearby and one of them had a fork arm. The soldier doesn't quite understand what the boy said, but someone soon approaches and steps on the boy next. A woman points her sword at him, saying that because he interrupted the king's Sauter's march he should slice his face, but the boy begs her not to do it. Kant, however, interrupts her, saying that she will tarnish the image of the soldiers if she does that. The woman does not like being interrupted, but Kay insists, saying that they have 5,000 Volk soldiers is watching them. However, this is not a convincing argument for the woman. Soon after, the king appears and tells her to stop, so she obeys the order. Riding on a cyclops, the king approaches, telling the boy to repeat what he said. Because he heard him say something about a human with a fork outside the Volk family's house. They say goodbye to Alvin, telling him he has plenty of food with him, and ask if he can walk. The boy answers yes. The daughter, very sad about his departure, says she will make sure to include him, the dog, and even her crazy brother in her book. The father says that if the protagonist goes west he can use the mountains if possible, even if he has to go around. But before they can leave, the king's soldiers appear and confront the two humans, wondering why two humans are together. One of them looks at the protagonist and says he is the target. They are looking for the guy who has a fork attached to his arm. Another soldier tells them to alert the king that they have found the fugitive. He tells the spectators that they look like Vuels who have helped humans and ask them to prove the contrary, not with words but with actions. So he orders a father to grab an axe and attack the humans. If he doesn't do it, he and his whole family will die. The woman is worried about this situation, but the father doesn't hesitate to grab the axe and throws the weapon in the boy's direction, but the axe doesn't hit them and goes in between them, aiming at the Sotter's beast. Soon the soldier realizes that the father did not obey his order. Then he is attacked by the man who, despite being unarmed, fights them to protect his family from the invaders. The soldiers don't stand a chance against him, for the father proves to be much stronger than them, even fighting armed guards. Then he tells the protagonist to run as fast as possible because more soldiers will be showing up. However, the protagonist notices someone approaching and warns him to be careful, but the man has distracted himself enough to be attacked by the elf woman from before. She says the Volk man is lucky that he didn't die from her attack, or maybe he has something more to him. The father realizes the woman is a knight, and one glance at her armor is enough to know she must be strong. Quickly he tells his daughter this is an emergency, and she knows what to do. The girl hesitates but agrees with her father's direction. Next she grabs her mother and tells the boys to follow them if they want to survive. The knight says the humans will die anyway because Roar is approaching with more soldiers. She calls him a damn foolish king for getting stabbed by that boy who just left. She also says she thinks the man didn't hear because there's a new king now, a king who can't even use sixth sense, and she finds this very amusing. Then she attacks the man and manages to slightly harm him, but she quickly launches a series of strikes and the man attempts to dodge them all. She's impressed with his abilities and says she'll have to speed up her pace to hit him. After that she nearly hits him, yet the man manages to escape. He goes to one of the fallen soldiers and picks up a sword. Now that he is armed and has already taken a good look at her adversary, she manages to focus on retaliating the attacks. She immediately notices that he can use the sixth sense. The Volk advances in her direction and with his sword initiates an attack, but she is not a knight for nothing and manages not only to dodge the attack but also to retaliate, successfully hitting the man. His sword flies far from him, leaving him disarmed. The knight says that because he was born of Volk he probably didn't receive any other training, but only his ear got hurt. Thus she concludes that he is a soldier and must have mastered the sixth sense during his time in battle, but now he will be executed for helping humans and killing the soldiers in the forest. His wife and daughter run away with the human boys. However, Leto is only worried about his brother and asks the girl where she is leading them. She replies that she has an emergency place to go to in situations like this, and there they will meet their father again. The protagonist asks her what she means situations like this. She says that her father is a deserter and that's why he lives on the run. Leto realizes that if he was a soldier he probably killed many humans. The girl says that's obvious because they are in a war and in battle it's kill or be killed. She also says that her brother died on a battlefield and was killed by humans. Leto states that he and his brother will follow a different path, but the girl says that such an idea is dangerous and he must remember what her father said. The protagonist says he doesn't care because they were going to separate anyway. She then tells Leo to do whatever he wants as she doesn't care if he dies or not, but her distraction allowed for an arrow to be released and it hit exactly where she least expected. Her mother fell right after leaving the girl, desperate to see her getting hit by the arrow. The shooter missed his target. It was Roar who, due to his bad eye, hit the woman instead of the protagonist. Upon facing them he says that he finally found him and is there to have his revenge. Next the king orders them to capture the runaway slave alive and kill everyone else. All the soldiers accompanying him advance. The protagonist tells his brother to step back while he takes care of it. Soon he advances towards the soldiers with his forked arm. He strikes the enemies with a certain ease. However, due to his lack of combat experience he doesn't know how to defend himself properly, and that's why his guard is broken by one of the soldiers who prepares to strike him next, but Cell doesn't let his friend get hit. and by the enemy's nose, yet he grows next, biting the entire head of the soldier. Soon he realizes that his end has come, and then the cuirass crushes his head with a brutal bite. On the other hand, the girl mourns for her mother and cries, seeing that she didn't survive. With that she becomes furious and rises, going toward the enemies. Her sadness turns into anger, and all she has to use is a stone, but she has a lot of strength. As with just that, she managed to hit one of the guards, who fell far after being hit. The others don't understand how she did it. Even Kant is surprised to see what she did, and one of the other elves says it's the sixth sense. He says he's heard that the sixth sense rarely appears outside of a battlefield, but a Voke who lives in the middle of nowhere can use such a skill, becoming a rare case alive, and also says there are cases where elves don't master the sixth sense, which annoys the king when he hears it. Either way, the elf says he will find the fugitive and sarcastically asks the great king to keep an eye on him. The king's bodyguard calls this elf insolent, and it seems that the king somehow agrees with it, even if he doesn't want to admit it in front of Kant. All that's left for the king to do is to watch the battle unfold from above. He sees that the protagonist is putting up resistance, accompanied by his loyal squire Sle, but Roar sees something else that makes him smile. The Voke girl entered the battle and is giving the soldiers a hard time. However, what she didn't expect is that an elf knight would join the fight. He is fast and carries out several attacks with his sword, until there comes a moment when she is cornered and the enemy's sword strikes a rock. Immediately she picks up a piece that fell off and hits his head hard. The elf composes himself after that and is furious for having been hit in this way. Upon facing the protagonist, some guards are frightened, for they realize he is a cursed one with powers obtained through a spider. Regardless, they rally and attack all at once. Witnessing this, the protagonist realizes their numbers and imagines that he would need more power to face them alone. He does not care if he ends up transforming into a full monster again, as long as it serves to protect his brother and kill all his enemies. But when he looks at Alvin, he realizes he was hit by an arrow. The boy, because of his conditions, didn't even see where it came from. He just feels pain. But before anything could be done, he is hit again, and the protagonist witnesses everything closely. Roar says he made a mistake again, as he didn't plan to kill him, claiming it's because of his eye again. Leto still cannot believe what he saw. He remembers that Alvin said the Vog family that helped him were good people and that his brother should not hate them. However, at the time Leto said all Vuls were the same, and maybe his brother forgot, but he affirms that it was Vul who destroyed their village and killed their parents too. Blue or green people are all bad, and he has to kill them all. This makes something awaken within him. The power of the curse begins to take over him, to the point where the protagonist is not even sure what is happening, because all he can think about is that he has to kill them all. The soldiers advance towards him, but along the way they noticed something different. Those who were in front didn't even stand a chance, and the others also died immediately, making the rest retreat out of fear. The elf who cornered the girl says that for a Voked girl she is good at attacking, but he affirms that everything has a limit and she crossed all of them. But before doing anything he looks to the side and sees a monster approaching. However, that was the last thing he saw before he died, because soon after he was split in two and even managed to see his body separated from his head. The king realizes that the protagonist is easily eliminating his soldiers. His bodyguard asserts that he has completely transformed into a cursed one. Roar is startled when he notices him approaching, but Kay says he has dealt with cursed ones before and there is nothing to worry about. After that, the Cyclops who was at their rear is hit square on by the protagonist. Both fail to notice because it happened so fast, but when they look at the fallen monster they realize a more dangerous monster is close to them. He removes his claws from the fallen giant, and in an unrecognizable way he imposes himself upon his enemies, clad in metallic armor made through the skills obtained by the curse. The protagonist in monster form faces his enemies, and in a notably swift manner he advances towards the Kant, defends the king while he flee. Even with immense strength the protagonist still hasn't managed to strike him, because the guard puts his experience to the test and throws his adversary and tries to attack him. However, Leto is faster now than before. Upon seeing the protagonist in front of him, Kant questions if this is the right arm. He says he is referring to the exoskeleton of the cursed ones, as not all parts are durable, stating that the farther from the toughest part the softer it will be. Therefore the most resilient part of the boy is his right arm, so if he attacks the other parts he may be able to wound him. The king then orders him not to think too much and just act, stating that as a king he can't occupy himself with such trivialities. However, already exhausted, Kay shouts, calling them cowards. The king can't believe he said that, but he realizes that the guard wasn't talking to him but to the other soldiers. KH tells them not to just stand there watching. He also tells them to aim for the head or arms and that the interior is as fragile as any human. After his words, everyone advances towards the protagonist. As the rain falls, he waits. But he doesn't just stand waiting to be attacked, because in the darkness of the night he paints the ground with the red blood of his enemies, and through the light emitted by thunder, Leto moves and ends those who fight against him because his speed is as fast as lightning. Kay notices this and is surprised, but his combat experience allows him to fight equally with the protagonist. After Leto is struck on the right side, his armor exposes his interior because it cracked right where it was hit. Kant realizes he was right. Given the protagonist speed, it makes it difficult to hit him, but his wounds heal quickly and he knows he needs to act fast. But he did not expect what was coming, for Leto managed to hit him straight on. Yet by being closer to his target, he tries to take this chance. He notices that this is bone steel. In terms of durability, it's stronger than others, and of course it can be heavy. Therefore he asserts that the protagonist cannot stab him with his fork, yet he is not left vulnerable to blows and takes a punch that he feels despite wearing armor. Kay wonders how this is possible, for he thought monsters were all the same in the end, and it should not be possible for them to damage his armor. The protagonist, however, is not caring about what he is saying. Far from there, under the rain, the father walks through the forest, but his strengths are already gone and he falls. This leaves him vulnerable to the enemy. The oak nymph, surprised that he had held on for so long, says there must have been many guys like him on the battlefield, asserting that had she stayed in a place like this she would have learned a lot to them from the P-Fork race. Strength is power. Both she and the man have become stronger in order to lead their species. Then she hears a noise and asks who is there. She realizes it's someone with a murderous look, and she can tell this even without a sixth sense. The person on the other side states that the nymph should leave that man to him, for he wishes to ask the man about some things. Getting closer, the elf realizes this is a woman. She remarks that the woman speaks arrogantly and cannot see anything because of her eyes. A man behind the Voke comments that judging by the armor, the elf must be of the P-Fork race. She tries to recognize him from a distance. The man introduces himself as Vlad, one of a rare species. He tells Yara that as expected she was aware and he thought he had escaped her senses, which led him to conclude she must have sharpened her directional skills. Yara asks if according to Kane he does not have things to do. Vlad replies it's been 2 months since the last time he saw him, thinking about his golden blonde hair and his black lips like staring at a face during a lunar eclipse sends shivers down his spine. Then Vlad goes to the Voke and calls him a traitor, claiming he left the battlefield oblivious to the mercy Kane showed him. Kane may have only taken his left ear and forgiven him, but he wants to tear him apart and kill him since he is dying anyway. The woman questions what Vlad is doing there. He was forbidden from stepping down on this land, being a Voke blood, yet him being spared and exiled suggests he was probably one of the knights. Vlad states he is only there to find Kane and asks her not to try to stop him and to leave before he tears her apart. The elf grasps that he really has the power to do so. After all, he was one of the legendary knights. Thus she mentions she has had enough fun and leaves, knowing she is not strong enough to face him. Before leaving, she says she'll head to the battlefield so they may meet again. Watching her leave makes Vlad think that even if the elf is the daughter of the Spoon King, she could be stronger than he was at her age. Yet setting that aside, he asks the Voke where is Kane. He answers that he heard Kane left the battlefield and went to live in the mountains, but Vlad does not believe this and assures he can smell the lie from a distance. He also says that if the man lies again he will cut him into pieces. However, Jara speaks and says the man is not lying, and tells Vlad to leave him alone. The father speaks that he has a favor to ask of Yara. She cannot believe he is asking this, especially him who deserted them and left, but the Vog speaks of his family and asks for help in finding them, as he lost his son on the battlefield and does not want to lose his wife and daughter as well. Yara asks if he got what he wanted after he left the battlefield. The Voke, who killed several humans to avenge his son's death, says he must have left in search of peace. The father remembers his family, his wife's smile, his daughter's joy. He also remembers his past when he asked to leave. Kane says that to survive in this world there is nothing one can do but become stronger. Each line should have a space between them. He also says that getting stronger is an addiction, and for one like him, a Veuler, it is a struggle to do so. He tells the Vulker that his son died because he was weak with a feeble heart that couldn't be cruel. He claims that his father is the same way. Even so, the Vulker says would like to return Then Cain with a single cut slices off one of his ears and tells him to go away because he was never fit for this job in the first place. After seeing the protagonist defeat some soldiers, Kant realizes that he is much stronger than he imagined, so he suggests to the king that they retreat, asserting that he's been having a bad premonition since yesterday and says they should return to the camp and come back with more soldiers. However, Roar doesn't like the idea, stating that he will gouge out the protagonist eye with his bare hands and that he will not retreat now, for if he does he'll become even more of a laughing stock. However, Khan asks if Roar will help in the fight, for as a king he should demonstrate his strength to others. Then Roar starts to make excuses, saying that he isn't feeling well and that his eye has not yet fully recovered, thus he's the first to run away, abandoning the fight. The protagonist seems to want to chase them, but the Vulca girl calls him, telling him to get back to normal or he could risk permanently staying in his current state, but he doesn't heed her words as he is focused on his target now. Next he starts rushing towards the enemies, leaving the girl and his brother behind. Roar realizes they are being followed and can't believe the protagonist has chased after them, so he orders Kay to do something. However, the guard sees a problem in this, knowing that if the beast reaches him he'll die. He thought he was only following the king for a promotion, but now realizes that it's no longer worth it, and even though the king insists that he should do something, Kant grabs Roar, calls him a useless bastard and sends him flying towards the protagonist, telling him to die, and uses this as a chance to run away. Roar, realizing that he's been abandoned, is shaken, but his problems have only just begun, for he is defenseless and confronting the protagonist, who in turn lands a solid punch on the king's face. Just this alone makes Roar nearly immobile. He tries to escape while screaming in pain, but his escape attempt is thwarted because Leto grabs him by the legs, lifting him up. Roar has no choice but to insult him, and for that he is hit again by the protagonist, who with another punch sends him flying away. Leto slowly walks towards Roar. Seeing this, the king tells him not to get closer using insults. He also says that shooting his brother was an accident because he was only seeking revenge for what happened to his eye. But these words only make the protagonist even more furious. However, just as he is about to strike the king again, the girl hits him with a rock and he's a bit confused, but she tells Leo to recover his senses. However, his current condition prevents him from fully comprehending because he lunges at the girl, and she says that she hadn't intended for this because she had read about it and practiced, now intending to convince him to return to his normal state. But at this moment Vlad appears and tells her not to be reckless, stating that it may seem effective but it's not enough. He also says that he will show the protagonist about how the world is gray from the protagonist perspective. He is completely overtaken by the power of the spider, desiring the death of all blues and greens, but he hears Vlad say that he seems to be enjoying this. Leto sees the vampiric elf standing next to the girl and wonders what is happening. The girl is also confused, as everything in the space has turned gray, reminding her of something she read in Jana Elliott's book. Vlad says that this is telepathy triggered by his sixth sense and advanced ability, and that it can infiltrate and destroy the enemy's mind in the space, saying this is the easiest way to defeat monsters like the protagonist. Next, Vlad begins to transform and becomes a disgusting looking monster that to everyone's eyes looks like a worm. After this he advances towards the protagonist, and Leo in his spider form doesn't know how to react, so he gets attacked and cries out in pain because he has been completely covered by Vlad's worms. The girl wonders if Vlad's actions will cause Leo to revert back to his human. Vlad responds that the protagonist has already lost part of himself due to the power of the spider. He was planning to ask Leto about Kane's whereabouts, but he has no other alternative now, for those leeches will suck his mind dry and Leto will eventually suffer brain death. Upon hearing this, the girl takes off running and tries to help the protagonist free himself from the worms. After seeing Leto's face being suffocated by them, she tells him to control himself. Then she holds him and pulls him from the heap of worms. Vlad is surprised to see this scene, as apparently the girl has found a way to free the protagonist. Next they leave the gray space, and Vlad still can't believe what he saw because the girl managed to save Leto, who was unconscious, and brought him back to his normal state, but for her it's just a feeling of having helped him. Yara appears and asks if she is the daughter of Daz. The girl asks how he knows her father. Yara replies that her father told her to search for her family. Now she just wants to bury him and go to a safe place. Hearing this leaves the girl somewhat confused, as she didn't completely understand what Yara said. At another moment we see a cliff and a hand emerges trying to climb it. Roar appears still alive. Luckily he didn't die, but now he is alone and scared, so he cries And in the midst of all this he yells in anger for being abandoned back at the core of the VOG family. The girl finds herself before her family's grave. She definitely wasn't expecting this, but she finds herself in a situation where she had to bear her relatives. Yara says she fought with the girl's father on the battlefield, so she granted his last wish, and now she says it's up to the girl to decide what to do with her. Then she says they will leave in 30 minutes and walks away from there. Vlad says the protagonist is completely unconscious, and Beman because he wants to question him about Cain. Yara says she heard rumors about Cain killing the king and running away, so they should start looking for the castle, but Vlad says that Cain is an honorable man and would never do this, so there must be another explanation. He also claims that he will go after whoever tarnished C's image, and next he tries in every possible way to make the protagonist wake up because he claims to smell Cain on him, so Leto will know something. But before he tries to do something, Samuel steps in to defend his companion. Vlad asks if Yara eats dog meat. She replies that she doesn't, so Vlad says he will shut the dog's mouth, but the soberist doesn't bow his head to him, so this leaves the vampiric elf in doubt. Yara also doesn't understand very well because the curist begins to repeat what he heard as he usually does. The voice coming from him seems to be familiar to Yara. On the other hand, Korn is controlling Sandel through a device. She says that through the sixth sense she is controlling the dog's brain. That leaves Yara amazed at seeing telepathy being used in this way. Vlad grabs the Subarus and asks if Korn knows about Cain, alleging that he left the battlefield and went west alone. He could be in danger, but Kay says that Cain is right next to her, so Vlad asks where she is and wants to hear at least C's voice because he does not believe this is possible as he is the only one connected to P. Kor asks if there's any chance they are with the boy, and she sees that Leto is right there. Vlad says he was about to kill him as he now is useless. However, Korn says he can't do that. She asserts that Cain wants him alive no matter what and tells Vlad to just cut off Leto's right arm. He asks why and Korn reveals it's a punishment for him running away from Cain. Then Vlad realizes that the two indeed had a connection, so he holds the protagonist's arm and promptly does as asked. After that, Vlad says the boy fainted again after screaming, and because of the spider's power he is already recovering. Kay says she can perceive that. Next she tells them to decide where they are going to meet. Vlad carries the still unconscious protagonist and a new arm is already growing in Leto soon. Vlad realizes this and says it's fascinating he is recovering faster than an elf. Yara asks why the girl decided to go with him because they are going back to the battlefield, a place that those who hate fighting don't want to be, but she says that if the girl is under Cain's protection she will survive, but the opposite happens if she does not adapt. The says that when she was younger her father and older brother were called to the battlefield. Soon she lost her brother there. They said that her father had killed humans while blind with rage, but one day he regained his conscience and asked to return home. After that he began to secretly aid humans. She claims that her father hid and protected them, but in the end he died because of humans, and even now she still can't understand her father saying that it's because of humans that things ended up this way, so she plans to follow in her father's footsteps to better understand him. Yara says that when she's in the battlefield she'll feel it, but she's saying this as she senses the girl waiting for something grand. However, she maintains that this world is hell, having turned even her father and brother into cruel people. That's why they died. Vlad interrupts the conversation announcing that they've arrived. Soon the group encounters a giant crab. The crab moves near them and in front of them a door opens. The group realizes that this is an entrance revealing itself, and from there the one they had been expecting comes out. Vlad's eyes light up at the sight, for Cain is before him and he accompanied by Yara kneels. Cain only responds with a satisfied smile. Vlad expresses his relief for Cain being safe and says he ran all the way there for him. Cain questions if Vlad didn't have duties in the West, and perceives that he led them all here. However, Vlad replies that he was worried about Cain as he had heard all things spoken about him like his having killed the king. Cain tells him to forget about it and he's forgiven for his disobedience. Vlad is radiant at hearing this, thanking Cain for his mercy. Next, Yara introduced Da's daughter to Cain and says that if he permits she'd like to care for and train the girl. The girl sees Cain and recognizes that he is the man her father followed on the battlefield. Cain only tells her to keep an eye on her. Then Sandal begins to lick Leo and Little by little he regains his consciousness. Kane states that he warned him he'd kill him if he fled. Soon after, the protagonist comes face to face with the elf, who looks at him with a terrifying stare. The Voke girl is shocked at what she sees as Kane preps his armor for something. Yara though tells her not to worry, as he won't kill Leto. His arm regrows after being cut off, so he will just be punished for fleeing thereafter. They mounted the crab house and headed west. On the way to the battlefield, an ambush was set up for them. Harpoons were launched at the crab and it was restrained from different angles to the point of it being trapped in the middle of the road. Vlad tells Kane to stay inside, promising he'll handle everything soon. The elf-turned-vampire dashes into the attack and fights some VKS who restrained them, even getting a taste of some of their blood. In response, Yara also engages in the fight. She notices Vlad's distraction and aids him in defeating their enemies. Yara uses her long hair as a weapon as it ends in a blade. Kane says his body will harden and rust if he stays idle, so he wants to join in the fun. However, by the time he arrives, the fight has already ended. Vlad comments that Yara has grown stronger during that time, and Kane is frustrated that nothing was left for him after this. Yara speaks to the girl, asking if she is always writing, to which she replies that she only writes what she sees, as she pens a book about her experiences just like Jana Elliott. Gara is surprised to hear this name, and the girl asks if she knows her. Kay states it's no wonder the girl knows nothing of fights, claiming that she's even more stoic than those B assassins. Anyway, Kay says she finds her intriguing. Thought everyone was ignorant and illiterate, but this girl is even writing a book. She also adds that Jana Elliott is an extraordinary person and a great inspiration to all witches, even if their gender or appearance is unknown, since it's been 100 years since their time. Core is certain they elven. Kane, after chopping off Leo's arm again, states it's the third time and asks how it feels, asserting that he never gets used to the pain, so it feels new every time. Also tell him to remember that if he tries to escape again, he must be the one to endure the pain. Along the path of a mountain range, Leto's arm was cut about 5 times. There comes a point when they stop and Corin says that's enough for her. Kane asks why she doesn't go on, saying she was ousted anyway since she doesn't have skills, yet the girl insists this was not the reason. She also says she still is a witch and setting foot in the West is still illegal. Not only that, but she claims she also has other things to attend to and look for before leaving. She states she will use Cuirass to contact Kane if need be. Bone Mountain, often referred to as the albino goddess's spine, is comprised of the highest mountains in Albania, with slopes so steep they reach the clouds it's an impossible mountain to climb. Bone Mountain lies in the center, and Albania is divided into west and east. In an area along the ridge there's a place called Broken Bone. It's said you can cross between the west and the east. There's a castle built by humans there, but it currently is in the possession of the elves. Vlad says it's now owned by the Pool Fork family. Going there is risky, as Lord Kane was falsely accused of killing the king. He calls them Pool Fork bastards, stating they're occupying what should be his castle. Regardless, they would cross the mountains even though they cannot climb them. Another entryway is here, and he points out the entrance to a cave. The gray rocky mountains were dotted with large and small holes, some of these holes fused into a passage, and the girl takes note of it all. Vlad asks the girl if she ever thought about writing a book about Kane, a story about his greatness and excellence. She says yes, but in her thoughts she says no. Back to Kane and Leto. The protagonist extends his arms and the elf asks what he is doing. Leto says he may take whatever he wants, however in exchange he must teach him about the sixth sense, as he wishes to become stronger and he also wants to become a demon. Kane however refuses, stating that Kieran is satisfied and is going to gradually teach him about the sixth sense. Seeing the expression in Leto's eyes, Kane concludes that he will achieve his goal soon, if it has not already been achieved. Vlad dislikes this, how Lord Kane has taken in a child, and he doesn't like that he is taking all of Lord C's attention. Lord Kane is truly unique, a perfect existence, and this kid is tainting his image. The fact that Lord Kane is caring for him bothers him quite a bit. In the meantime, the group travels through a cave. Leto thinks he must kill them all, not only the BL-skinned ones but the green-skinned ones too. In the midst of it, he locks eyes with the Voke girl. The protagonist tries to keep a straight face but quickly looks away again. The girl is also uneasy, for she believes her family was killed because of Leto. They kept walking in the darkness, could care less about time. They started to see a purple light ahead. Breaking out of the cave, they saw a new sight, a purple sky, gray rocks of odd shapes, a desert. Fear and curiosity. This was the west, the place where Jana Elliott's tales began. From the top of a rock someone recognized Kane. It was the character who appeared before, and upon seeing Kane states that it's a great pleasure to see him again, even her friend's rat shows up at this time with a giant golden spoon. Rocks are being hurled towards a castle which by the way is quite run down, which the rock hits squarely. The shooter says this is the last and asks an ogre to assist him with the stone already equipped. He makes the final throw. Several VOG soldiers watch this. The rock flies over them and hits the castle again, but this time the impact is bigger and a part of the structure falls. Given this opening, the elf knight orders the soldiers to advance and says they must annihilate all humans and cannot leave any alive. In droves the Vul army heads toward the castle. A human orders that everyone on the fallen side of the castle keep firing at the enemy as they can't let them in. The battle intensifies between the armies from a distance. The elf commander thinks that if the Vul army is withdrawn, the humans will quickly recover the castle. He understands that numbers are numbers, but wonders where they are coming from. Next someone approaches, calling for Duke Spoon, saying that there's a message from Mr. Ko, who has ordered that the remaining knights should gather, but the Duke knocked him off his horse. The messenger doesn't understand why, and the Duke says that even if it is a battlefield it is not permitted for a Voke to ride a horse. While looking at him in that way, and asks if he believes he became someone just because he's riding a horse. He also says that if the message isn't important he'll cut off his head with his spoon. The messenger apologizes but says Mr. Cin has warned that the king is dead and Kane is responsible for the murder. Somewhere else in the west, Kane is sitting at the table savoring a fine piece of meat. Vlad asks what he thought. He also says although it is not possible to get good ingredients in this area, it was still prepared by the best chefs. Kane says the meat is tough. With that, Vlad is desperate because Kane didn't like it. Soon he looks at one of the servants and they keep staring at each other, but the young woman who received them says the meat is very good, and her partner realizes Vlad has not eaten anything yet. The young woman however dislikes one thing, seeing the children. She asks if they know how to fight, claiming they look disheveled. Leto wonders why the stupid green-skinned Voke is staring at him so much, and his expression makes the Voke think that Leto is belittling him. However, his friend says this child is a cursed one. Soon the Voke realizes that he must have special powers. Then he tells Kane he now realizes something strange is going on. The elf asks what would that be. Vul's friend says that in just 1 month he's seen 3 cursed ones, especially in a place that isn't the natural habitat of spiders. The VOG says one of them was even 10 times her height and she's never seen anything like that before. However, his friend considers this description exaggerated. Kane in turn says that if the cursed one was large, probably the one who curs him can also be, and this does not seem to be the work of a spider but something more dangerous. After hearing this, everyone else becomes scared. The table goes quiet for a while, but suddenly Vlad begins to laugh, saying that Mr. Kane made a joke. The others also start to believe in that. However, the protagonist does not follow this line of thought and just calls them idiots, but Sandal was nearby and repeats what the boy said in thoughts, and thus he is punished, having his arm torn off once again. Then Kane says to everyone he will get straight to the point. Now firstly he asserts he will take the children with him, and from now on his main goal is to kill Roar, as he is the new king, and doing this they will have to wage a war against the whole kingdom. In the royal army there are more than 10,000 VOG soldiers and hundreds of elf knights. They might even have to face the Waiters knights. For now Kane says he needs to find his red army, believing that most of them will follow him. The Voke then says they should go now, because with all of them fighting together the opponents will not stand a chance against them, but Kane disagrees, saying that they need to divide into 2 teams. One of the teams will have Vlad, Dr. Fiona and Yara. Those who are left will go with him. Leo fell, and cuz Vlad dislikes having to divide into 2 teams and even less being separated from Mr. Kane, he immediately asks why it has to be this way. Kane responds that he just doesn't feel it. Vlad doesn't understand, but the elf explains that those in Team 1 are already very strong, and if he joins them it'll be no fun, as they would defeat the enemies easily. Vlad becomes very frustrated after hearing that. Regardless, 3 days later, in another place far from there, a knight extends a large circular rock and positions it on the ground. They are known as restaurant knights, for they have the names of kitchen items, but they also refer to each other as Knights of the Round Table. He is Bon, the Knight of the Tongs, and he says that's why he tried to put together something similar, and claims that everyone at the round table is equal, so they will exchange ideas in this manner. The meat hammer, the coffee grinder, says it looks like a round table. Even though it was just put together, it would have been good if they also had a tasty meal. On his turn, the napkin, the clean freak, says that of the 13 anointed by the king, only 6 remain, or 7 now that Roar has become king. Spoon the Fearless says, as everyone must have heard, Kane, one of the 7, killed the king, the very one who led the Red Army. On the front line it's also said that this is a betrayal against the Elvish kingdom, its Ains, the great Elvish race, and they should discuss what is the most suitable punishment for Cain. However, one of them does not believe that Cain killed the king. Coin of Delicacy says that if the rumors about Cain are true then let them be, but he refuses to believe this nonsense about him having killed the king. Bando tells Cin that it is a tradition of this table to respect one another and asks him to not be rude, yet Cin says to hell with the traditions and asks why he is pretending to have a discussion when he has already made a decision. He also tells them to get straight to the point instead of wasting time. He wants to know if they're talking about that Cain, and he states that instead of indicting him for this and that they should simply kill him. Back to the protagonist core, he and the others prepare to leave. Cain says this is where they part, and he tells the others to go straight to the Red Army and introduce themselves to Commander Basil, stating he trusts him more than the others. He also says that Basil trusts no one but him, so they should use his password that Cain told them earlier when presenting to him. Cain says that this isn't pleasant, but he bids goodbye, saying he will see them again later. Upon leaving, Vlad laments his departure. 2 days after their separation, an intense battle occurs between two cursed ones. The protagonist is almost completely transformed while the other is totally overcome by the curse. Regardless, Leto charges the attack and leaves no gaps for the enemy to strike him, for he uses his size to his advantage. He then manages to break the enemy's armor, and with the claws of his arm he readies them for attack, striking directly in the opening of the enemy's armor. Thus Leto manages to kill his opponent and comes out victorious. After the battle from afar, Cain says that Leto is beginning to awaken his sixth sense, for this skill can be learned through focus and experience. You must focus on your opponent, and experience comes from winning the battles. He also says that the opponent is nothing more than a piece of flesh, and Leto should not feel remorse when he has acquired enough experience. There will come a time when he will begin to see the world as gray. This means that his sixth sense has been awakened. When that happens, Cain affirms that the protagonist will be capable of becoming a demon. Leto says he understands the guidance but realizes that the elf is not the only one watching his fight. Cain tells the girl that he won't carry useless kids around, and next time they encounter a cursed one it will be F's turn to act. He also says that he expects her to be different from her father. Then Cain walks towards the dead opponent and picks him up by the armor, realizing it was a Voke. He states that he has never seen a cursed one of this size and recalls what Fiona said, appearing to be a larger female spider than the one that attacked the protagonist. He deems this as interesting. Looks at the elf and thinks that the number one reason for joining this man was because he believed he could learn to become stronger. Cain tells Leto to call him sir from now on instead of master. Then Leto asks why they are going this way, for he thought the goal was to reach the army as soon as possible. The second reason for joining the elf is that Leto believes once they find the army, a civil war will start among the elves, and he wishes for that to happen. Cain answers the protagonist question, saying it's true that his army is the best, the elite of the elves, and with him he won't lose any battle. However, there is no tension among them. This only makes Leto think that the elf is indeed a maned man who can only think about having fun. Fell writes in her diary that as they cross the desert the purple sky remains the same, but the terrain keeps changing all the time. All creatures from the smallest to the largest are completely different from the ones she used to see in the east, yet something beyond this catches her eyes, for she sees a rock floating in midair. She can't comprehend why this happens. Cain explains that it's a rare phenomenon that only occurs in the west, and there are more like phenomena that are remnants of the albinos to whom the world belonged a long time ago. Some Elish followers called this magic. These elves are called witches, and they traverse the west in search of new magical powers. The girl tells us that the royal family used the excuse that they were going against God's will to banish them to the forest and made it illegal for them to set foot in the West. Cain says she knows the story well. She mentions having read it in a book. Leo questions why the relationship between wizards and other elves is poor since they're all of the same kind. Cain retorted that it's a stupid question, and then asks if the boy believes he can get along with anyone as long as they're the same species. He also asserts that a day will come when Leo would have to kill humans. The girl writes that the west reeks of blood. The sky is always purple, but there is always a mist that prevents distinguishing with the naked at whether it's day or night, and occasionally through the purple mist it seems like someone is watching. She then looks back as if hearing something. Can also appears to notice this. With his sharpened senses he manages to catch an arrow in the air before it hits him. With this he realizes that they are both being followed, and he starts running to catch up with the enemies until he comes across a hole from which they realize was used by their attackers. The protagonist says they escaped through there, and at a glance it looks like quite a fall. However, before he backs off, Kane pushes him, and after a long fall Leto hits his head on the ground, swearing in his thoughts about the insane elf. After they fall, the others also descend through the hole ahead of him. Kane sees a great fork in the path, and realizes the road ahead is long. Affirming he can feel the danger coming from there, immediately getting pumped to continue advancing. The protagonist and the girl end up following him even though he thinks the elf is lunatic. But amidst all this, Fel asks why he isn't apologizing. Leto asks what she's talking about. The girl says her father died trying to save him and her mother too. However, Leo replies that their family was killed by elves, and if anyone should demand an apology it would be him, claiming that because of the Vul his whole family also died. This makes Fel think her father made a mistake in saying him. Regardless, they keep moving forward, and Kane says there's a large space at the end of such a long passage, so the main event is about to begin now. From afar at the top of the cave, silhouettes of people begin to appear, thus Kane and the others realize they are certainly not alone. However, the protagonist realizes they are humans. Kane says he now understands that no matter how many castles are destroyed or how many people are killed, humans will always be driven to fight back. He also says hiding underground helped them. Soon the humans recognize him as Kane the Knife Knight, saying that as expected he finally showed up. The elf understands they're speaking as if they were already expecting him. Someone steps forward affirming that indeed, having seen his red armor crossing the Gry mountain, asserting that they know Kane Balstein, commander of the Red Army, declared a hero by the elves for killing many humans. The elf states that in addition he's also known for being handsome, but asserts he doesn't recognize her as he doesn't remember seeing her before. The human introduces herself as Tana. After this, rocks start to be above the ground. The Voke girl recognizes she has seen this before. Tan says she is the daughter of King Sath, who died a year ago hanging on a cross. Now she wants revenge for what Kane did to her father. Not only do the stones float, but the girl does too. Through her powers she manages to do this and is ready for the confrontation. Seeing this leaves the protagonist mighty impressed. Even Kane is intrigued by this strange ability as he realizes it's something different from the sixth sense. One of the humans says he'll have to delay them while Lady Tana gets ready, and another one of them looks at the protagonist and notices he's also human. Leto still seems confused about all this, but the previous human says he'll attack him, and orders the other to take care of the V-girl. Just as they train, they agreed to proceed accordingly, saying they'll show the enemy their newfound powers. Kane quickly recognizes they're also cursed and sees that humans can control their powers, making them tough opponents to defeat. They claim they're going to show the enemy the strength of humans, thus the four engage in the battle. Kane however thinks that the stronger these people are the happier he'll be to fight them. Seeing the elf laugh like a man and makes Leo worry, because he doesn't know whether to side with the humans or the elf, and he also doubts if he'll succeed regardless of the decision he makes. But as he stands still and thoughtful, one of the cursed humans grabs Kane and takes him far from them. Leto immediately realizes he will be the next one, and before he could do anything he is knocked down by another cursed human. However, on the ground he begins to transform, and the human realizes that the boy is also cursed, and asks where he was bitten. The protagonist in turn doesn't want to talk, and with a kick he pushes him away. Now the human knows he is strong and cannot stand still, so he goes on the attack again. With a mega strong blow he knocks the protagonist down again. Leto tries to get up and fight back, but before he can, the human immobilizes him and says it looks like he was lucky and gained some power after being bitten by a flashing spider. He also asks how can someone who can't even use the sixth sense control this power? Is this something he learned while being with those elves? But what he did expect is that the anger provoked in the protagonist would awaken something even greater in him, so he releases Leto and steps back a bit, for he wonders what happened. Now Leto responds that he is not on the L's side, but the human doesn't care and delivers a strong kick to him. After that he says he will listen to him later, but for now the boy can take a nap. The other human says he is also done, but he asks if that dog isn't a Cerberus, stating that he was surprised when it suddenly increased in size. However, they go crazy when they see one of their friends because he is being harmed by the elf's hands. Kane plunges his knife into the human's eye, saying that he's happy about it as he didn't expect to face such a strong opponent. He also asks how many they are and if there is anyone stronger in the group, but another human appears to help his friend and manages to hit Kane and throw him afar, for his strength was enough to reach him, and through his armor the human tries to use a Scorpion-type sting telling the elf he's going to kill him. However, it's not as easy as he thought, for Cain not only escapes but also fights back, but the humans shall prevented him from being struck full in the abdomen. The human is angered by what happened to his friend, saying that he was a good man and he won't forgive the elf. However, another human arrives and comforts him, saying that if his armor encloses his head he will lose himself. If he does not want to become a monster, he needs to calm down right now, because they're facing the infamous Cain and they cannot lower their guard. Another human says he shouldn't fight to win but just needs to buy a bit more time for Lady Tana to become stronger and take care of the rest. With these words they advance towards the enemy, yet Cain does not just stand still and wait for them. He tells Kieran to release a bit of his power, but this time he wants 2 seals, so the armor does as commanded by its master. In a blink of an eye, Cain attacks the humans with more speed and with more strength as well. With just one of his attacks the elf realizes the enemies felt it, for they are left stunned as they are hit, yet the humans do not give up the fight. Even then Cain attacks them quickly and even manages to cut off a part of the enemy's armor. Another human tells his friend to be careful full with his arm, but it's no use because Cain cut off the enemy's arm. The human cries out in pain and Cain prepares to strike him again. However, he didn't expect what was coming, for he feels a great force approaching and realizes there's a white light coming from the girl. She apparently has her powers charged, a force so great that even Cain is astounded. Then he orders Kieran to release all of his power, releasing all the seals, but before he could do that he was hit in such a way that his armor disintegrates. After a while the protagonist wakes up and wonders where he is on the other side of a cell. The human says he has finally woke up and says that from now on the boy just needs to do what he says, and if he does that he won't get hurt. He also says the door is open and he can leave. The protagonist then steps out of the cell and notices that something is approaching, but when he picks it up he realizes it's just an apple. The human says it's precious as there aren't many trees in the west, and as he may have noticed most of them were stolen by the elves anyway. Leto stares at the fruit, apparently having never tasted one like it before. About the book he says he was just going to take a look but ended up reading it entirely, and asks if it was the Vogue girl who wrote it because he was curious to talk to her. Then he states he will ask some questions politely and he could handcuff and torture him for answers, but he won't since they're both human and he would be grateful if the protagonist answered honestly. Next he asks Leto whose side he is on, given that he was seen walking with an elf and a Vogue after a conversation. The man says that being enslaved and bitten by a spider is an incredible story, so he understands that Leto is saying he had no choice and can somewhat understand his situation. He soon tells him to follow as there must be lots of questions that he will answer as they walk. The protagonist asks where he is and claims he has never seen such a long cave. He replies that they are at the bottom of a mountain and says that nobody other than them knows about this place even in the West, as it was a place that was discovered accidentally by humans who are hiding here and there after losing a battle against the elves. It has large holes that lead to giant caves. The air circulation is good and light is reflected inside, so it does not become too dark. Further down there's even a place where there is water. Moreover, these holes are useful to them since the humans are able to carry out surprise attacks thanks to them. At one point they were even in a position to recapture one of their castles. The man asks if the protagonist thinks humans are losing the war. Then Leto encounters the human colony and realizes they are still resisting. The man says there are dozens of places like this in the Mountains of Bones and they are gathering people who can fight through this. They have trained about 1,000 soldiers. Leto realizes that many humans are still alive and is impressed by them all gathered here, but he knows that even so it's not enough. The man says that the fighting abilities of the elf species are far superior to those of humans, and if you also take into account the Vul, 1,000 people are nothing. But he claims that the real power of humanity lies elsewhere. He reveals that when they discovered this place there was a colony of spiders there and that this space was a habitat for cursed spiders. To occupy this place they had to fight them. Many sacrifices were needed to finally expel the spiders. After that Picker the man asks another if the king is in there, and he replies yes. Picker asserts he's certain that Leto already knows that being bitten by a spider gives him great strength. The physical ability that being bitten by a female spider gives is the white armor, humanity's real power. Next they enter a chamber and Leto sees a chained spider. Then he realizes that the humans managed to imprison it to use it for their own purposes. However, a woman says this isn't the first time he has seen one. Picker says she is their leader, the queen, granted as Lady Tana. However, the protagonist thinks she is too young to be a queen. Tana asks Where he is from. Picker introduces him as Leto and says that he used to hide in a forest in the east, but then he was captured and enslaved by the elves. He also asked him some questions, and it seems that Leto isn't on their side, and about the spider that bit him, it seems it was indeed that one. Leto asks what he means. Picker says that while they fought with the spiders to occupy this place, they saw two large female spiders. One of them disappeared, and it was probably the one that bit him, he says. Leto knows firsthand that being bitten by a female spider makes him a cursed one, and they plan to use the power of that spider. With this they believe they can win the war against the elves. Next, Leo asks what happened to Cain and if he died. Picker replies they are currently keeping an eye on him in a special area and will squeeze the most they can out of him. The protagonist also asks about the dog and the girl. Hearing this, Picker hesitates to respond, but the Queen of Humans says that Cuz ran away, and the girl is being held prisoner along with other captives, the same ones that are used for experiments. Leto asks what kind of experiments these are. The scene cuts to Cain, who, like the man said, is being held captive, all chained up and without his armor. He seems quite frustrated to be in this state, and he tries to use his strength to break the chains. However, no matter how much he tries, he cannot, and you realize you're not as strong as before, for the chains did not even move. He knows that. When his broken armor was shattered, two of his strength seals were removed. With his current level, he will not use this T-boned steel to seal his strength within his living armor, is to lock it behind a door in his plane of unconsciousness. In his current state, it's as if his key had been stolen. Although he could breach the door by force, it would take too long and have side effects. If even a newbie who had never held a sword before cut his head now, then he would die immediately. It's a really dangerous situation, but instead of being afraid, Cain gets super excited about this. To him, this is the real tension, like the sensation he had when he entered the battlefield for the first time. Prior to this, he tried to use his living armor to recreate this feeling, but knowing that he could always release his strength whenever he wanted, he never felt any real tension. But now it's different. One of the humans who had fought against Cain before appears and laughs in his face. He then says he wasn't sure if Cain would break the steel chains, so he was watching, but he thinks there's no need to worry, as perhaps the elf is nothing without his living armor. From there, someone appears and says that this is the place people call hell. She looks at a mountain and imagines Cain's face on it, for she longs for the moment they will meet again. Tyrell says that this will be the place where her romance with Cain really will begin. The human guard then passes under another cell. Looking down, he sees all the Vuels held captive as prisoners. The VKS mentioned are kept in the cell where the door is in the ceiling. Soon the girl asks what this place is, for she also asks who all these humans are and why they are imprisoned there. One of them says that just like the girl, they were kidnapped by the humans, even though they don't know why they are kept there. Another, however, says it is obvious that humans are going to lose the war, so they must be keeping them as hostages for negotiations. And by negotiate, they are not going to kill them. The first Volk asks why they periodically take one of them from the prison, stating that the Vuels who were removed never returned. Soon the optimistic VK says he doesn't know, but is sure that the elves will rescue them once they win the war. He firmly believes in this, saying that the elves will help us just as they did in the past when the Vuels were enslaved by humans. Fell for a moment worries about Leto, but soon after she wonders why she is worried about him. After that, a human appears at the cell door and walks in among the VKS. He looks at each one as if he were looking for someone. The human walks past some children, but when he faces Fell, tells her to come with him. The man extends his hand, however, to the girl's surprise, she is not the one he has chosen, because the man took another child who was pleading for help, but no one did anything. However, Fell doesn't just stand still and let this happen, and tries to stop the man from taking the child. The girl asks where he is dragging the child, however the man dismisses her with a kick, calling her rude. Soon he takes the Voke child with no resistance. Fell keeps asking where the child has been taken, but no one knows for sure, and they just tell her to keep quiet if she wants to survive. After that, the protagonist hears the Voke child begging for help, however the man who took her only orders the child to be quiet if she doesn't want to get hit with blindfolded eyes. The boy cries. The protagonist asks about this boy, and Picker replies that he is a Voke from the mountains and they are being captured because they are useful to humans. Next, Leto witnesses the boy being thrown into a hole, screaming as he falls to the bottom. One of the humans says they will begin to lower the chains. Next, he proceeds to do exactly that, lowering something towards the boy. Then, through a gap in the blindfold covering his eyes, he sees that what was being lowered was a spider which, despite being chained, was still alive and apparently hungry. As It descends. The boy pleads for help. The protagonist asks what is happening and Picker replies it's the spider's feeding time. He claims it's hard to collect the spider's venom when it's hungry. A short time later he says they can now raise the spider again. Soon it ascends through the chains and on its F it can be seen that she fed on the Voke boy. Picker asks Orba if he is ready. Orba responds affirmatively for he has trained extensively. For this day the human mentions that when the spider feels sad it begins to search for a host for reproduction. Therefore Orba extends his arms making them available for the spider to deposit its venom. Picker says the spider does this once a week and they gain another soldier. He also mentions that in the beginning almost everyone died because they had trouble removing the baby spiders, but after capturing some VKS, dissecting them and experimenting on them, they can now remove them safely. At the bottom of the hole Leto sees many dead Voke bodies that were used as test subjects. However, Picker tells the protagonist not to feel sorry for them, asserting that it's their fault for being born as VKS, and next week he says they will feed the spider. The Voke that was with Leto back with C. He is still in the cell though battered from the harsh treatment from humans. The human responsible says that the elf's wounds have healed within a day and asks if he's ready for another round. He also says it's impossible to get used to the pain. It feels new every time. Therefore if Kane continues to be tortured non-stop he will eventually beg for mercy, but as he whips the elf he mentions it's not time to stop, not until he confesses everything they want for the man beating the elf. Wishes to savor this moment for a long time. The whip cracks as it hits the elf's back, for apart from being a torture tool it is also equipped with spikes, further increasing the induced pain. However, in a momentary lapse of concentration from the human, Kane, despite having his hands tied, manages to hold the whip with his mouth, thus disarming the human. With the chains on his feet he manages to trip the human and the human falls face first onto his shoulder. The human realizes what C is trying to do but can't prevent it, for soon after C manages to bite the human's nose and holds him captive. Shortly after that he repeats the human's earlier statement about not getting used to pain though he can barely speak properly, while the human cries out in pain for his nose despite difficulty speaking because his mouth is on the human's nose. Kane states that's why if you want to escape from the pain you have to become the one who inflicts pain. Subsequently, with a ferocious bite, Kane rips the human's nose off. After a loud scream he is left alone in his cell in silence until another human appears. C asks him to do a favor and remove the other human from his cell, for he is still lying there and the cell is a bit tight. For 2C's smile and his sardonic demeanor frightened the man. The story returns to the protagonist and we see him in a fierce battle against some Vul. His anger fuels him as he defeats his adversaries until he sees his brother on the battlefield with arrows in his chest, so he rushes towards Alvin. The injured boy pleads for help but Leto realizes his mistake. It's not his brother but a Vul boy, so he is shocked by this scene. Afterwards he wakes up realizing it was all a nightmare. Seeing the Vul boy die in such a manner the other day affected him and it's causing him restless nights. Leto remembers the first folk he killed, the one who begged not to die because he had a family. He also remembers F's father and his own brother who claimed he felt the same as the Vul. Contrasting with this he remembers Picker's statement that it's their fault for being born as folks. All these memories conflict in the protagonist's mind to the point where he loses strength for a brief moment. Nonetheless he exits his room and encounters a colony of humans outside, but one of the humans suggests he better not go out this time, although acknowledging that the boy likely has many questions and suggests that he can just stroll around this area and then come back. Leto asks where the Voke who was captured yesterday is. The man queries the reason for his question and Leto responds that the VOG stole one of his belongings and he wishes to recover it now, so the man tells Leto to try going through there and he will probably see her in the basement. Thus the protagonist follows the path the man pointed out and the humans watch him with a bit of confusion. In the basement not only Fel but other Vuls are also held captive. When they thought all hope was lost someone above calls her. The girl realizes she'd heard this voice before and she looks upward in the direction of the caller. Leo tries to ask if the girl is okay but her face reveals all and he gets his answer. He had never seen her cry before. Nonetheless the girl is somewhat relieved to see him and asks if he is safe and what's been happening. The protagonist tells her to keep her voice down and asks if there's a door nearby. She says yes, and the other Vuls realize they have a human aiding the girl. She in turn says he will save them all, but a skeptical Vul says the girl has lost her mind, for a human would never save her, but F argues that he knows nothing, assuring them that Leto isn't a bad human. The protagonist approaches the cell door and thinks he can open it with his arm. He immediately asked them to move away from the door, but before trying to open it he asked the girl what it's like to be imprisoned. Fell doesn't comprehend why he would ask such a question now. What was it like being close to death, he asks, stating that it's over for all of them now, as it's time for the humans to take their revenge on all the VKS. The girl wonders why Leto is saying such things. She also mentions that for a moment she had had hope in him because of his father. Leto departs wishing them a good death and asserts that he'll find the thing she stole, as it must be hidden somewhere nearby. The protagonist thinks that definitely something, or rather someone, is hidden, or better yet someone is hidden and watching him. Therefore he had to maintain appearances to Leto. It's strange how they believed in him, a stranger, from the start and let him go to a place where so many Vul are held captive alone. The protagonist is certain they don't trust him and are watching him all the time, hence it's better for him to win the trust of these people and then seek a way to escape. Leto was right about being watched, as through an opening Picker was carefully observing him. Obviously he knows that cave much better than the protagonist. After this Leto leaves and goes to another area until he runs into Picker, who asks how he slept. He also comments on the place being quite cold and tells Leo to follow him as he should eat before starting the day. Later on Picker informs him that those are edible insects they eat there. He also explains that the supply situation isn't good, so it's hard to send other food to the cave. Continuing their previous discussion, Picker states that humanity's main goal is to create an army of the cursed. As the protagonist had seen before, they use a female spider to create the cursed, hoping to have thousands of soldiers, but there are numerous problems. As in most successful cases of creating a curse, it dies quickly or fully turns into a monster, hence they'd like to study the protagonist. Picker says the blue-eyed male spider is the source of their power. They label this as a male power, including him and all the other cursed ones with that male power. However, Leto's power color is green, coming from a female spider. Picker asks whether Leto remembers their first fight, stating that at the moment he choked him he had a strange sensation. It was as if Leto's whole body refused to be attacked. Picker then theorized that the protagonist could hold the power of a famous spider and wishes to verify this theory by studying him under the pretext that it would surely contribute to the making of a more perfect soldier. Picker asks whether the protagonist could help him to assist humanity in winning the war. Somewhat awkwardly, Leto this response pleases Picker, for he adheres to the thought that both greens and blues must die and have all their eyes torn out. Tyrell reappears. She hums a tune about C as she walks and wonders what their reunion will be like, but upon reflection she ponders over how she will find C in all of the West. She then goes to the Lord of the Broken Bone Fortress, Butter Fork, but he knows nothing about C, asserting that he has not been to his fortress, nor could he go there because this place is his property. The Butter Forks. Surely Cain knows that showing up after betraying the Elephant Kingdom will lead to his death. In any case, that blonde is irritating. He isn't even a pureblood elf. He also says that he heard the news about Count Pillar, who was killed by Cain at a ball, and he is impressed that his sister has gone west to avenge their family, a thing worthy of such a noble elf. Thus he says he would give permission for her to cross the west. Tyrell knows that Cain has gone to the west, but he has no idea where to look, as the entire west is vast and she fears she won't find him, but at the same time she believes in the power of love and affirms that she needs to trust in it and the connection she has with Cain. So she calls for the help of the universe to find Cain, asking for a star to appear, revealing his location and to shine amid all the darkness. But what appears in front of her is Vlad, whom Tyro calls an ugly star. Back at the human colony, some boys are playing pretending to be soldiers. However, a man steps in and grabs one of them by the arm. The boy even complains of pain, but immediately the man understands why, because he sees that he is injured on his wrist. Afterward he apologizes and tells them they can begin to play again soon, but the child claims he's completely human and the man can even strip him to verify. However, the man says that marks can start appearing as he grows, and if the boy is mixed then he should never lower his guard. Frightened, the boy agrees with this. Mr. Bugle was on his way out when another man calls out to him, saying that Her Majesty wishes to see him under candlelight. A meeting is held called by the human leader. TNA says that as she heard from the scout a few days ago, the Red Castle has also been taken because of its vast agricultural lands. It has become the army's main supplier. They used to call it the Sky Stronghold, and asks if it's been taken by the Red Army. Bugle answers that no, apparently it was a regular army with a majority of VKS. Then Tanner realizes that the Red Army didn't show up this time either and asks why the army that continuously takes their Castles is so quiet. Picker replies that it may be because of Kane. Another human claims that it can't be because of one guy, as there are other knights from the resistance who could assume the leadership of the Red Army. Tanana says that due to the war many generals were created, many heroes and strong people have died. Despite this, humans were able to push the elves back. With their superior military force, it seemed that the humans would win until a warrior among the elves began to attract attention. His name was Kane Ballstein. One by one strong humans fell. The elfin military, which used to be divided into various groups, combined and massacred the human army. In 30 years after Kane led the Red Army, the whole kingdom of humans was pushed to the west corner. Then one of them asks if that's why the Red Army is not moving, because Kane is not leading. Picker replies that Kane is the true commander, so they won't move without him. Promptly the human says they should kill Kane in order to demoralize the elves and to get revenge for his chopped off arm. However, Picker says no, because if they find out that humans killed Kane, the Red Army will start moving and they need more time to prepare for that. Bugle says he understands Boba but tells him that he can't act on his emotions because his actions will determine whether they will win or lose the war. After a while, Leto comes across a knife. Picker seems ready to use it, but he just wants to make a cut on the protagonist's arm and warns that it will hurt without anesthesia. Leto thinks he has had his arm cut many times but never gets used to the pain. Then Picker says they will kill Kane the next day. He says they aim to use their army to reclaim stolen castle and to demoralize the enemies. They will execute Kane in front of them. He also says he decided to trust the protagonist in hopes that he will fight alongside humans to win. Picker says Leto's arm is regenerating immediately. The regeneration speed is faster than the elves and confirms if he said his transformation goes up to his elbow, but in the background Leo can see remnants of the elf's armor. Anyway, Picker says he's done and wants to end the day since he's very busy preparing for the expedition. Then Leto goes back to his quarters, but he's approached on his way. The children ask if he's a cursed one too and how many Vogs and elves he has already killed. One of the boys claims that one day he will be the best of the cursed ones, as it is his dream to kill as many blues and greens as possible. Leto tries to understand what is going on in the boy's mind and he asks if the boy wants to become a monster. He leaves soon after, leaving the children disappointed. After that, the protagonist wanders aimlessly among the human colony. He walks among them slightly downcast until he finds a staircase. Then he decides to go down and even manages to get passage to the underground. Calmly he descends the stairs into the darkness until he meets Kane. The elf comes face to face with the boy and Leto asks if he plans to escape. Leto tells Kane to start talking and if the boy can make him laugh he might even save him. Kane remains silent for a while. The protagonist stares at him demanding an answer. Then the elf says that a long time ago there was an elf who was raised among humans. Although there were already enslaved green skin Vul, humans had never seen blue skin before, and so they watched the child, calling him part of a rare species. Seeing how quickly the boy healed, they began to scar him. For fun the boy endured, hoping that one day he would become accustomed to the pain. When he turned 15 to escape the cold of the north, humans traveled to the continent of the albinos. There humans saw the blue-skinned elf for the first time. First it was out of caution, then came the hatred, and after that in the war the boy ran away from the humans for the elves. The boy joined the army as a soldier, fought against humans. Although he nearly died several times, the boy, who spent a lot of time with humans and therefore knew their habits well, also knew their weaknesses well and became a major influence in the war. He who became a man on the battlefield was determined in this full of monsters. Soon he would become the king of hell. Leto listened attentively to Kane's story, and as soon as he finished the elf smiled. The protagonist asks if this demon was able to become a king, what would happen to humans, and VKS Kane responds that in this realm people would not be divided by the color of their skin only, by who is strong and who is weak. Leto says that what Kane said was neither interesting nor funny. Then he throws into the cell what was left of the elf's armor, saying that this was the only piece left and he can't do anything else if it doesn't work. However, Kane says that it is enough and orders Khan to stand up and to come to him. At that very moment, gradually the piece of armor gets attached to the elf and tells the master that he is hungry because he doesn't have the strength. Leto extends his arm to him, ordering the armor to eat, so he does, eating the arm and using it as strength to stand up. Kane asks Kieran to release his power. He asks how much and the elf says he wants it all. Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye.